Track 1.7.
Let's hear now from Susanna Zarajski. She speaks 7 languages and spent many years teaching English abroad and has even written a book called Language is Music. Is this reluctance to learn foreign languages just a feature of Britain, or do you think all English-speaking peoples?
I think it's all over the English-speaking world, and I think there are 2 main reasons. One, as I agree with your previous speaker, that there's a lack of necessity. People don't see the necessity, and so necessity breeds motivation. And for example, we see that in Brazil, there are English language schools popping up everywhere because they need to learn English to be able to sell their products abroad. The other reason is that English speakers have little to no exposure to the sounds of foreign languages because almost all of our media is in English. So people in other countries will start to listen to music in English, watch programs from the United States or from the UK or from other parts of the world in English, and so they get used to the sounds. And prior exposure to the sounds of a language make it much easier for a student to learn a language, and it's much more fun when you have music and media.
Is that what happened to you? I mean, were you exposed to foreign languages from a young age?
I was born in the former Soviet Union, and I came to the United States when I was 3, but I grew up in an area with a large Hispanic population and Vietnamese population. So I heard Spanish from a young age, even though I didn't start formally studying it until I was 15 or 16. So I already knew a lot of songs in Spanish when I started learning. So when I had to learn grammar and words, I had a context in which to reference what I was learning in school. And because I already knew songs, I already knew some words, and it was fun, and I could pronounce things. So music is a huge aspect of language learning.
So you had a bit of a head start, if you like, but what would be your advice to other English speakers, perhaps averse to learning foreign languages?
To find music that they like in the other language, to find television programs that they like in the language, to watch movies in the other language, because your heart has to resonate with the language. You have to actually like it, because you live a language more than you study it. So you have to find something that you like about it. For example, if somebody likes watching football, they can watch football programs in another language, so they're at least getting used to what it sounds like. If they like a certain type of a movie, whether it's animation, they could look for those type of animation programs in other languages.
And it's worth it, you reckon?
Of course, because, you get paid more money usually in government jobs if you speak another language. You have much more opportunity. You have many more opportunities to do trade if you speak another language. And in the United States, we have 20% of our population speaks another language at home. So even for domestic marketing reasons, it's important.
Susanna Zarajski, who speaks 7 languages, and join me there.
Track 1.10.
The word radio was first used in the 1900s, although of course radios were invented long before that in the 1820s, but they were originally called wirelesses. The word environmentalism was first used in the 1910s. People began to be concerned about pollution and wildlife towards the end of the 19th century, and in 1916, a National Park Service was set up in the USA to help protect wildlife. The word spacecraft, meaning any kind of spaceship or satellite, first appeared in the 1920s, at about the same time that science fiction stories became popular in films and magazines. However, the first real spacecraft, the Russian Sputnik, wasn't launched until 1957. People started talking about babysitters in the 1930s, and the word technophobe, meaning someone who has a fear of technology, was first used in the 1940s. This was about the time when people started using technology such as vacuum cleaners and washing machines in the home. Brainwashing is making people believe an idea by constantly telling them it's true. This word was introduced in the 1950s. And an in-joke, a joke that is only understood by a particular social group, was first used in the 1960s. In the 1970s, people first started talking about Bollywood, the Indian film industry based in Bombay. In other words, the Bombay version of Hollywood. The concept of ecotourism came in the 1980s, when the tourism industry began to respond to the demand for tours which benefited or at least did not harm the local ecosystem. The 1990s saw the invention of blogs, originally called weblogs, as more and more people became connected by the internet. And in the 2000s, people all over the world started doing the Japanese puzzle Sudoku. The word selfie was introduced in 2013 to describe photos people take of themselves with their mobiles, although the first known selfie was taken 170 years earlier by Robert Cornelius, who took a photo of himself using a mirror in 1839.
Track 1.11. Paul.
Language has been changing much faster since people started using the internet. Now people pick up words and expressions from each other, and new words spread much faster. This means, though, a lot of new expressions probably won't last very long. LOL, BTW, Bluetooth, CD-ROM. 20 years ago, these words didn't exist. No one used them. But in a few years' time, they will have gone out of fashion, and other new words will have come into the language.
Rosa.
Another thing that's changed is punctuation. Emailing has had an effect on the way people write. People have stopped using strict rules for punctuation, so people use commas much less than before. Spell checkers and predictive text mean that people don't need to know how to spell, and people's spelling seems to just be getting worse. Lose, loose, where, were, they don't show up on spell checkers. It's a pity. People are getting more information, but they're getting worse at expressing themselves.
Greg.
I agree with the article that language often changes slowly, but I think this process has been speeding up over the last few decades. A lot of American words have come into the language probably because of TV and films. For example, people used to use flat, but now more people have started saying apartment. Because of international communication, dialects are disappearing, and people are starting to speak the same kind of English. For example, the word movies, which was originally used mostly in North America, has now replaced cinema and film all around the world. In about 50 years, most dialects of English will have died out. And I think dialects are important because they're part of people's identity. It's a pity they're disappearing and everything's just becoming more uniform.
Claire.
Some people complain about new words, but it shows that the English language is alive. The world is changing and languages need to change with them. And this is nothing new. Older generations have always complained about language changing. They've always felt strongly about it, but it's a natural process. New words come into the language because they enrich the language. For example, the word selfie, which people started using in around 2013. People had been taking photos of themselves before 2013, but they hadn't had a single word for it, so it caught on quite quickly. And some words also change their meaning. So, for example, wireless these days is about internet connections. We talk about wireless LAN and Wi-Fi. The word wireless had had a completely different meaning until computers came along. It meant radio.
Track 1.15. Part 1.
Well, that's all from me today. Coming up after this short break is Katia with the City FM News.
Coming to you from the heart of the city.
Nice one, Oscar.
Yeah, not bad. You've not broken the equipment again, have you, Alex?
No. That's your job. Hi, Sarah. How are you this morning? Oh, full of the joys of spring, I see.
What? Oh, Alex, it's you.
Well, don't sound so pleased to see me.
Sorry, message from the boss.
Right.
She wants a meeting this morning.
And?
I've got a feeling it's not exactly good news.
Oh, don't be so negative. Nadia probably just wants to thank you for all your hard work.
That'd be something of a surprise. When's the last time I turned in anything decent?
Oh, come on.
Anyway, what are you so cheerful about?
I've just booked my holiday.
Oh, good.
Yeah, Italy.
Lovely. You know, my dad is Italian.
No way. Hey, maybe you could teach me some bits and pieces. You know, basic survival phrases. Please and thank you and stuff like that.
Survival phrases? Think I need a few of them myself.
Hey, Sarah. Ciao, bella.
Track 1.16. Part 2.
Ah, Sarah. Take a seat.
Thanks, Nadia.
Now, do you know why I've asked to see you?
Is it something to do with our long-running series of interviews with authors?
Exactly. Look, Oscar has already booked 6 authors, give or take.
6?
He's even managed to persuade Max, what's his name, to come in.
Who?
Max, what's his name? You know, author of Solar Wind. The guy who wrote the entire book sitting on a bench on the Palace Pier here in Brighton.
Max Redwood. Wow, that's great news.
So how far have you got?
Well, I'm still sort of like in the research phase, you know.
I appreciate you're still finding your feet here at City FM.
Well, I'm beginning to feel like I've got the hang of things.
Okay, but you must understand. For me to be able to offer you a permanent contract here, I need to see some evidence of your capabilities.
I understand, Nadia. I'll get something to you soon, I promise.
Ah, Oscar, do come in. Let's touch base soon, Sarah.
Scusami, signorina. Parle inglese.
Leave it out, Alex.
Don't tell me. She's promoted you to editor-in-chief.
Something along those lines, yeah.
Go on. Tell me all.
Well, basically, she said, if I don't get something big like an interview with a best-selling author, I'm out of here. Or words to that effect.
Ah.
You don't happen to know, like, a best-selling author or something, do you, Alex?
No, afraid not.
Oh, that's not your new girlfriend again, is it?
Yeah, it's Emma.
She's keen, isn't she?
Oh, hang on, Em.
Track 1.21.
Well, I'd been renting accommodation, a room in a nice cottage in a village 60 miles from London for 4 or 5 weeks, give or take. The landlord had told me at some point I'd be getting a flatmate, but to be honest, I'd kind of got used to being there on my own. To start with, I'd had all my stuff in my room, of course, but as the weeks went by, I kind of thought, I could put some bits and pieces in the spare room. And then, oh, I'll put my drum kit in there too. And so it went on. I was really making myself at home. I'll always remember the morning I met Michelle for the first time. I had a cold and I was still in bed feeling sorry for myself when suddenly I heard a key turn in the lock of the front door. I raced down the stairs with the full horror of the situation dawning on me. Just as I got to the bottom step, she opened the door to see me in my pyjamas and a blind panic. She looked at me and said, "Have I come at a bad time?" or something along those lines. That was roughly 13 years ago now, and we've been close friends ever since. After we moved all my stuff out of her room.
Track 1.22.
I think we're in a unique situation today with regard to language diversity, and there is no precedent for it in history. The English language has become the world's dominant language, and although other languages such as Chinese and Spanish are more widespread, English is spoken by the largest number of non-native speakers. In fact, there are a vastly greater number of people who speak it as a non-native language than there are people who have English as their first language. There are probably around 1 billion people worldwide who speak English to some degree of proficiency as a foreign or second language. It's a huge number of people. It's been estimated, for example, that something like 80% of all conversations in English between tourists are between non-native speakers, so a Russian talking to a Japanese or a Spanish speaker talking to a German, but using English. The implications of this are, of course, enormous. Naturally, this is quite unrelated to the nature of the English language itself. Some people say English is an easy language, but in fact, English has the same degree of complexity or simplicity as other languages, and the reasons for its dominance are largely historical and to some extent accidental. It just so happened, for example, that the USA adopted English as its national language rather than French or Spanish. I mentioned earlier that the dominance of English is unique. It's true, of course, that Latin played a similar role as an international language for around 1,000 years, starting with the Roman Empire and continuing until the 16th century. Latin was the language of science and of theology, and rather like English today, it was used in intercultural communication. But its use was limited to a few highly educated people, so it wasn't used nearly as widely as English is today. English is used by everyone, not just a small elite. People often talk about how English is threatening other languages, but I don't personally believe that dominance of English as a world language is going to have much effect on the diversity of human languages. It's true that smaller languages have been dying out and they will continue to die out, but that's more as a result of improved communication and not because of the spread of English. People are going to go on speaking their own language, whether it's Russian or Italian or Arabic or whatever it is. There's no sign at all that everyone is going to drop their own language or that there will be one single language spoken by everybody. It simply isn't going to happen, in my view. So the only real disadvantage of the dominance of English, as I see it, is for native speakers of English themselves, as it means that they have less need to learn other languages. So in a sense, that's an impoverishment for them. Also, of course, it's quite understandable that speakers of other major languages might resent the rise of English as a global language. But the good news for them is that the dominance of English probably won't last. Before English, French was, of course, the international language, at least among educated people, for a couple of 100 years, and before that it was Latin and Arabic and Greek and so on. In other words, various languages have played this role, and this has come and gone over time, and no doubt it will be the same with English. Take Sumerian, for example, which was the main written language in most of the Middle East for centuries. The last records of Sumerian are from the 3rd century, so it survived as an international language for over 3,000 years. But of course now, most people haven't even heard of it. It's a dead language. Compare that with English. So far, English as a truly global language has been going for about 50 years at the most. So who knows what's going to happen to it? One thing that's certain is that nothing lasts forever.
Track 1.30.
A few months ago, I went to a friend's place for dinner. It was a fun night, lots of lively company. You know, one of those nights you feel you've talked about everything and solved the world's problems. Towards the end of the evening, I was feeling a bit tired, and I just kind of sat back and watched and listened, did nothing. It was interesting. It struck me how what we say sort of defines who we are. Talking is a way of fitting in, you know, a way of showing that we belong to a social group. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about this and began to wonder what would happen if I just stopped talking altogether and was just silent. What would happen to me? How would I come across to other people? I decided to read up on the topic of vows of silence. There were some really interesting stories online. Often a vow of silence is for spiritual purposes, and people go into some kind of retreat to cut themselves off from the outside world. I guess you could say that's not about communicating at all. It's like taking time out to focus on yourself. But some of the other stories I read were about people taking what you'd call a more public vow of silence. What I mean is they continue to live in the real world and communicate with people, just they didn't speak. Some people did this as a protest, like against censorship or something like that. I didn't have any kind of burning cause I wanted to protest against, but for my own reasons, I was still intrigued by the idea of a public vow of silence. So I decided to take one, just for a weekend. I knew I'd find it hard to last much longer than that. I looked on it as a kind of social experiment. I knew it was going to be a challenge.
Track 1.31.
So, a whole weekend without speaking. The person I found hardest to deal with was myself. When I'm alone, I often talk to myself or sing or hum. But no, I wasn't allowed to do any of that. I had to keep my vocal cords completely out of action. I managed okay, except for a couple of times, like when someone held a door open for me and a little thank you slipped out. Also when my phone rang, I couldn't answer. I was quite proud that I remembered, even when someone woke me up calling early on Saturday morning. But I did text back. So you see, I still communicated, email, text, all that sort of thing. I just had to keep my mouth well and truly shut. The first thing that amazed me was just how easy it is to communicate without words, like buying a coffee. I just sort of pointed to what I wanted and nodded in agreement when the person in the cafe got it right. I even met a friend for a chat. I could react to what he had to say by means of a facial expression. Occasionally I did have to write some things down on a notepad, but I was amazed how much information I could get across without trying too hard. The most interesting thing was the way other people related to me. When I was queuing in the supermarket, a woman tried to have a conversation with me. She bombarded me with questions. When she eventually realised that I couldn't or wouldn't speak, she just made up her own answers to her own questions. She had a whole conversation with herself about why I couldn't speak. She thought I was unwell. Also, my landlord was interesting. I had to go and pay my rent on the Saturday. He always goes on about something when I go and see him. He usually likes to run down some politician or other. I don't always agree with him, and we often end up having a heated discussion. But this time, I just listened. And when I left, he said, "It was great to have a good chat." This was interesting. I don't think he really noticed that I hadn't been saying anything. He was so caught up in what he was saying, he wasn't very aware of me. And it made me think, well, aren't we all a bit like that? We're all so busy talking and expressing our ideas. It's like a kind of prison that doesn't allow us to communicate with each other and see what's going on around us. Most of the time, people treated me kindly. I often felt that my silence brought out the best in people. Being silent for 2 days really gave me a chance to see and feel things without feeling I needed to respond or react. I mean, I often wanted to, but I had to hold myself back. And this meant I just had to let things go, just let them be. And I felt more peaceful, more connected with everyone and everything. So it really was fascinating, my weekend of silence. I recommend giving it a go.
Track 1.37.
Millions of visitors come to the Swiss Alps every summer. There's walking, climbing, swimming, cycling, paragliding, almost no limit to what you can do here. For some people, these sports aren't exciting enough. Instead, they go base jumping. This means jumping off a cliff and free falling before opening your parachute and landing safely, they hope, in the valley below. The idea of jumping off a mountain may be a nightmare for some people. Base jumpers say it's an experience like no other. To find out, I watched 24-year-old Ada Hoffman go on her first jump. So Ada, you're about to go base jumping and it's your first time.
Yes, I'm due to jump in about 10 minutes.
How are you feeling? Nervous?
Yes, nervous, but also excited, very excited. I'm keyed up. I'm going to enjoy this. I've been parachute jumping quite a bit. I've had training in that. I jumped maybe about 300 jumps. Most people say like 200 is a minimum. Other people say 500 is a minimum. So I feel ready for this base jumping. So yes, it feels like a natural step.
And what are you going to do exactly? You'll be jumping off the mountain, right?
Yes, there is a platform which sticks out over the cliff. And yes, basically I'm planning to jump off that one.
And then?
Then I'll be jumping from about 900 meters. So I'm aiming to free fall for exactly 25 seconds. And then I'm going to fall for a further 30 seconds with the parachute completely open.
And land safely in the valley?
Yes, you'd hope so, yeah.
And how will you know when it's time to open the parachute?
I'm going to count the seconds. That's the only way of doing it. When I reach 20 seconds, or count on 20, I'm going to pull this string hard, and then the parachute will open in about 5 seconds.
OK, well, good luck. I'll talk to you again after the jump.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi, you made it.
Yes.
So how was it?
Oh, it was good. It was a good jump. Everything was fine.
How did it feel?
Amazing. There's nothing like it. Really, absolutely amazing. A bit scary at first. You walk along this platform and then you just have to jump. And then you feel really calm, completely in control. And after the parachute opens, it's quite peaceful, It's just, you drift down and it's just wonderful.
So, will you go base jumping again?
Oh, yes, definitely. I'm definitely going to do it again. Maybe I'll go later today, actually. I'm also thinking of trying a tandem jump sometime. When you jump with somebody else, you jump together. I think that should be really fun. But you have to be very careful.
With the number of jumps likely to hit 30,000 this year, it's clear that the sport is highly attractive. But there's no question that it is a very dangerous sport and not everyone survives. Many people say it should be better regulated or even banned, but base jumpers disagree.
Well, it certainly is dangerous. Yes, it's very dangerous. And I think you need to be aware of the risks when you take a jump. So if you're not aware, then you maybe shouldn't jump. But you're not coming here thinking, oh, I'm planning to have an accident. That's not what you're aiming to do. You come here with the intention of having a great experience, and that's what you do.
Track 1.44. Part 1.
Yeah.
Right, so I'll pick you up about 7.
Great.
What else is going on today then?
Nothing much. Max is due back soon.
Max? Who's Max?
My brother. He's staying with me at the moment, remember?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
He's getting on my nerves, to be honest. There's just not enough space.
Wait, he's not still sleeping on the sofa, is he?
Yes. And his stuff's everywhere. And he's just so volatile. It's like walking on eggshells half the time.
Isn't it about time you asked him to leave?
Well, I keep dropping hints, but he doesn't seem to notice.
Why don't you just tell him straight then? Don't beat around the bush. There's a lot to be said for being upfront about things.
I can't just boot him out.
Hang on, did you say his name is Max?
Yeah?
Max Redwood?
Yes.
The same as that guy who wrote Solar Wind?
No, he is the guy who wrote Solar Wind.
You mean it is him? Your brother is the Max Redwood?
It's no big deal.
I don't believe it. Oscar is interviewing him tomorrow.
I know. Look, I've really got to go. Max will no doubt be hungry when he gets in. See you tonight.
Yeah, okay. Bye then.
Track 1.48. Part 2.
So, Max, I was thinking, have you thought about the possibility of finding your own place to live?
I hadn't really thought about it, to be honest.
Well, I mean, it's not as if you're short of cash anymore, is it?
True.
It might be in your interest to invest some of it into property.
Invest? Property? What are you talking about?
Well, it would be lovely to have your own workspace, wouldn't it? What do you think?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, but I can't think about any of that right now.
Why not?
Well, I've got that radio interview tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what to say.
Oh, don't worry about it. You might want to have a think about what you could say tonight.
There's nothing else to say about Solar Wind. The book is the book.
Oh, Max, don't get so wound up about it. It's only an interview.
Only an interview? You're joking.
Hey, I'll be able to listen to you.
Don't you dare listen.
All right, calm down.
Maybe I'll just go far, far away. Take a vow of silence. Live on a desert island somewhere.
Yeah, you might as well.
Emma?
Track 1.50. Luba.
The social activity I liked most was the whitewater rafting excursion. I'd never done anything like that at all, and it was a lot of fun. It was quite expensive to do, but I think it was worth it. We had to pay for the guide and hire of the wetsuits and everything like that. But the feeling of being swept along by the current of the water was a bit like being on a roller coaster. It was infinitely more exciting because everything was far less predictable. The only negative thing that happened to me was that when I got off the raft, I slipped on a wet rock and sort of twisted my ankle. Still, it won't stop me from trying this again.
Mehmet.
I did both the social program activities, whitewater rafting and the bungee jump. The rafting was nowhere near as exciting as the jump. I loved it so much, in fact, I'm planning to do another jump before I go back home. For me, there was one thing I found a bit strange about these activities. When we went to the river and to the jump site, we were just picked up by a minivan driver. There was no one from the social program who came with us. I mean, we had a good enough time just with ourselves, but it was a bit odd that no one from the committee was there. Not very friendly, I thought.
Paolo.
Actually, I didn't do either of the sports activities. I like sports, but I'm not so keen on these extreme sports. The more dangerous they are, the less I want to do them. So, with the whitewater rafting, well, I'm not such a good swimmer, and I was told it'd be a bit risky. And then with the bungee jump, well, I've never really understood the thrill of throwing yourself off a bridge. I'm quite good at normal sports. Football, tennis, volleyball, and I like hiking. Why do sports have to be extreme all the time? Some people complained about the cost, but that didn't surprise me. These things cost money. I don't mind paying, it's just it needs to be something I really want to do.
Changying.
For me, the highlight of the year was doing the bungee jump. To begin with, I really wasn't sure about it, and I remember when we were in the minivan on the way there, the closer we got, the more nervous I became. I almost pulled out at the last minute, but everyone encouraged me to go ahead with the jump. It was truly amazing. The initial free fall is the most incredible sensation I've ever felt. Just a big rush with this amazing sense of freedom. The only negative aspect of the experience was that we had to pay half the price. $100 is a lot of money. I'd been led to believe that all these activities would be paid for. I mean, I could afford it, and it was worth it. But I thought these things were meant to be covered as part of the social program.
Track 1.54.
I've volunteered all over the world, building homes in Papua New Guinea, doing post-tsunami work in Sri Lanka, helping paint a school in Thailand, and I used to think it was the best way to travel. In 2005, I decided to organize my own volunteer trip, a bike ride across Cambodia with 5 friends. We were going to teach students we met along the way and raise funds to build a school. We spent months fundraising through book sales and bake sales and speaking at community groups. We named the trip the Peppy Ride, with Peppy being Protect the Earth, Protect Yourself, because we were going to teach about the environment and health. The thing is, it turned out there was more than one small problem with our plan. First of all, we didn't really know that much about the environment or health, or Cambodia for that matter. And the money that we raised for other small projects that we hadn't researched very much got wasted or landed in corrupt hands. And that school we helped to build, well, when I arrived to see it, I found a half-empty building and realized something I already should have known. Schools don't teach kids. People do. I was pretty disappointed, as you can imagine, that we'd spent the better part of a year fundraising and planning, and things hadn't turned out to be as simple as the celebrity volunteer trips I'd seen on TV. So I decided to stay in Cambodia a bit longer and figure out how we could put that school building and the rest of the funds we'd raised to better use. That little bit longer turned into 6 years living in Cambodia, during which time I founded an education NGO, and to raise money for the nonprofit work we were doing, I started a volunteer travel company, where I led hundreds of volunteers on trips to Cambodia. At first, our tours looked a lot like that first bike ride, and I took people on trips where we'd teach English, or yoga, or paint a building, but I slowly began to see that I was part of a growing system that I no longer believed in. After a decade of joining and leading volunteer trips, and from interviewing volunteers from all around the world as part of a book I'm now co-authoring, I now firmly believe that the growing practice of sending young people abroad to volunteer is often not only failing the communities they're meant to be serving, but also setting these travelers, and by extension our whole society, up for failure in the long run. More and more young people are growing abroad to volunteer each year, as part of school requirements to build their CVs, or part of gap year trips. Much of this demand is fueled by the opinion that because we come from financially wealthier countries, we have the right, or obligation, to bestow our benevolence on people. Never mind if we don't speak the language, don't have the skills or experience to qualify for the jobs we're doing, or don't know anything about what life is like in that quote-unquote poor place. Now, as a former serial volunteer myself, I'm in no way trying to criticize the good intentions of these volunteer travelers. I know from my own experience that our desire to help is sincere. But I also now know that good intentions are not enough. Yet good intentions are usually enough to get people to support your efforts. The praise and encouragement for international volunteering is almost blind to the details, the process, or the research for how these young volunteers are actually going to help. Throughout the time we were fundraising for that first bike trip, countless numbers of people praised our generosity and bravery, yet very few people questioned us at all about our plans. Perhaps instead of handing us a check, someone should have asked us how we planned to learn all we needed to know to be of help to anybody. The local papers wrote articles about us that made it sound like part of our heroism was the fact that we didn't know very much. I believe that our lack of critical engagement when it comes to international volunteering is creating a double standard.
Track 1.58.
What do you think to my boat, Sakwa?
No, the boat is nice, no problem.
You think it's nice, no problem?
Yeah, no problem.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to try and get inside. Oh, this will be my home for the next few weeks. Here we go. Can you push me off, Sakwa?
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
Okay, see you in a few days.
Yeah, we shall see you again. Safe joining.
Thanks, mate. My first paddle strokes. Oh, first of thousands, probably. This is absolutely amazing. It's very shallow in parts. You might be able to hear the base of the boat just rubbing along the rocks. But it's so quiet out here. I've only been going about 20 minutes and already I've seen far more wildlife than I've seen in the last 3 days just in the forest surrounded by jungle. There's dragonflies buzzing around, cattle egrets, large blue herons, kingfishers. There's a whole cloud of white butterflies just on the Sierra Leone bank. I'm completely hemmed in on both sides by jungle. Oh, a fish. Big fish just swam straight past. The water is so clean here. I'm just silently drifting up to this enormous fish eagle. I can't be much more than 8 feet away from it now. It's just staring straight at me. Big white capped head, dark wings, burgundy brown across the back. Just close enough now to see that it's got a massive catfish in its talons. I think I might leave him to it. Managed to just get my camp sorted, but this is my first night alone in the forest. I've got my mosquito net up. I'm actually in my hammock, but my hammock's on the floor because I'm in a little stone island in the middle of the river. Just at the end of the day there was quite a large cataract and I didn't really fancy taking it on till tomorrow, so I've just camped in this little island basically. But I'm kind of worried if it rains tonight though, but the rain might just run straight through the middle of my camp or something. I don't know though, I guess I'll find out. I'm just trying to catch my breath. I think the island last night marked the start of a series of rapids. Just these rock-strewn whitewater passages, maybe 100 to 150 metres long, and then you get a short break and then another and then another and another. I just took on this last one here and made a terrible mess of it. Ended up sideways, hit this big rock in the middle of the river which almost flipped the raft, just managed to get control of it again and shot out the bottom of this kind of small waterfall. So I'm just taking some shelter in this eddy right now. I'm going to have to unpack everything and tip out any water that I've taken on. And the thing is, just got to be so careful because if I lose the raft, I'm finished. It's got all my communication equipment on, it's got all my food on, it's got my shelter on it. Without it, I cannot survive. And now I am so far from the next village.
Track 2.2. Part 1.
Coming to you from the heart of the city, City FM.
Okay, Max. So I'll just talk for a minute to introduce you and then we'll begin the interview, okay? Are you ready?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, when the light turns red, we're live. Hello, I'm Oscar Simmons from City FM and I'm here to talk to Max Redwood, author of the bestseller Solar Wind. Thank you for coming in to talk to us, Max.
Thanks.
So, as many of you will already know, Solar Wind is a story about space travel. And basically, in a nutshell, a group of explorers are visiting a remote planet which is populated by people. That is to say, aliens. Now, these aliens look very similar to humans, but have a radically different culture. I'd like to begin by asking you where you got the basic idea for Solar Wind, Max.
Well, the idea came to me when...
I mean, did you get the idea from your own travels and experiences of other cultures, for example?
I haven't really travelled much, actually. I was planning a trip across Asia once.
All right.
But, well, to cut a long story short, I had to cancel it, so...
Right. So, in other words, it all just came from your imagination then?
Well, You could say that, yes.
Okay. So next, I'd like to move on to your childhood. Were you interested in science fiction growing up?
Well, yeah.
Right, so now for the question that all our listeners will be asking. What happens next? Or to put it another way, when will Solar Wind 2 be published? Right, I see. So it's top secret information then?
I'm sorry?
What I meant by that was you're not allowed to give any dates yet. Right, so to wrap things up now, I'd just like to thank Max Redwood for taking the time out of his busy writing schedule to come in and talk to us today. Thank you, Max, and looking forward to Solar Wind 2.
Yeah. Thanks. No problem.
Max! Hi, Alex. I'm Emma's boyfriend.
Emma's... Alex, of course.
Yeah, listen, I read the book.
I'm really sorry, I've got to go.
Nice to meet you too.
Track 2.6. Part 2.
Oh, hello, Max.
You didn't listen, did you?
No. How did it go?
It was an outright disaster. I came across as a blithering idiot.
Calm down. I'm sure it wasn't that bad.
OK. Let me try and think about this calmly, shall I? All things considered, I think my first and last radio interview, listened to by the entire city, was... How shall I put this? A complete and utter embarrassment. And my career's totally ruined. And I'll never be able to show my face again. Yes, I think that just about sums it up.
Calm down. I'll put the kettle on. You'll feel better after a cup of tea. And a biscuit? A chocolate one.
Track 2.9. Tony.
I know Prague quite well. I've been there several times. I've got friends who live there. And, of course, it's one of the most beautiful cities in Europe. There's the old centre, exceptionally well preserved. It's full of beautiful buildings, all periods of history. And not to mention the Baroque buildings in the old city centre that have been skillfully restored and look stunning. So, yeah, I'd say it's definitely a beautiful city, definitely worth visiting, no question. But there are hordes of tourists. The last time I was there, I went to the Charles IV Bridge, which crosses the river. And don't get me wrong, it's a very beautiful bridge, but it was teeming with people. It was impossible to stop and look at the view or take photos. I'd recommend going outside the main tourist season, though there's not really any time when it isn't busy. I've got friends who live there, and they say they don't go to the old city centre anymore. It's too crowded and too expensive. They go to the other parts of the town. It is a real shame that tourism has made these historic places unaffordable to local residents.
Lola.
I went to Prague last winter and I loved it. It's got such a romantic atmosphere. Beautiful old buildings, the cobbled streets, the squares with the fountains. People say that it's been spoilt by tourism, and it's true in a way. The center gets very crowded, especially in the summer. But if you look beyond that and appreciate the buildings and the old-fashioned atmosphere, it's still really a magical place. The thing I love most in Prague is going up the hill to the castle. I went up the twisty, narrow streets, and then there's the breathtaking view across the old city. Looking down, there's a maze of steep red tiled roofs spread out beneath you. It's like something out of a children's storybook. I took so many photos of Prague. Every corner there's something to take a picture of. It was wonderful.
Track 2.14.
Now, you know that little voice in your head that questions if you've locked the car properly or turned the iron off? That uneasy feeling that you get when you think there's something you should be doing, but you just can't remember what it is. More often than not, these are groundless anxieties that simply reflect that many of us are born worriers. But sometimes that voice in your head, that gut feeling, warrants your attention. And many doctors, particularly GPs, do pay it attention when faced with a patient that doesn't quite fit the description in the textbook. All may appear well on the surface, but you're left with a nagging doubt that all is not quite as it seems. So a doctor's right to heed their gut instincts. Anne van der Broel is a GP and research fellow at the University of Oxford.
A lot of GPs especially, they recognise this feeling that they get sometimes, although not everybody admits or acknowledges that they sometimes act upon it. It's seen as something mysterious, or maybe you should not talk about it, but it is real. And when you talk to GPs about it, they're really happy to be able to share that experience of having this gut feeling and using it sometimes in their medical decision making. So it is something real, but it's not always acknowledged as a valid or a useful tool.
Well, do we know if it's useful?
Well, we do, because we've been doing studies in, for example, serious infections in children. So that's meningitis or pneumonia. And we have found that gut feeling is the most powerful predictor in general practice of a serious infection in a child.
But how do you go about measuring the effect of something like gut feeling?
Well, we asked doctors to record whether they felt something like gut feeling or an instinct that something was wrong in 4,000 children. And then we compared those recordings with what ultimately happened to those children. And we were able to calculate the diagnostic accuracy, if you want, of gut feeling. And we found that it is very, very accurate. It's very useful. It's not 100% right, but the chance that something serious is going on is much higher when a doctor has a gut feeling.
Well, Margaret McCartney's been listening in from our Glasgow studio. Margaret, I suspect that none of this will come as a surprise to you.
No, and I think gut instinct is one of those real rich themes of general practice that kind of goes underexplored and I think unacknowledged as well. When you talk to doctors over coffee, one of the things that we're always saying to each other is, I'm just not quite sure about that lady, or I'm just not quite sure about that hanging together. But I think there's also a little bit of shame that goes along with it. I think sometimes it's seen as being a bit unscientific, just having this kind of gut instinct, this sort of feeling about someone. And it's a kind of slightly romantic idea that kind of harks back to the kind of old style videos or pictures of doctors sort of just having a feeling about someone. And for me, it's not unscientific at all. It's actually highly scientific, because what you're doing is you're saying, actually, out of all the people that I've seen with similar symptoms, you're just a bit different from everyone else. So it's almost like recognizing that this person just doesn't quite fit the pattern, but you're not quite sure in what way they don't fit in with that pattern. So what you're doing is you're opening up to saying, well, I'm unsure, I'm uncertain, and the possibilities here are potentially something quite serious, and I'm not going to just let that go.
And this isn't the only piece of evidence that suggests that it's a powerful tool.
No, and what I find really fascinating is when you go and ask doctors around the world, as some researchers have done, do you experience a similar kind of phenomena? All doctors will say that they do. Some people will describe it as feeling something in their stomach, something just not quite right. Other doctors will say that they feel it in their bones, that something is just not right. And it's just this idea that you get something that jars, something that just doesn't quite fit properly together, and you have a sense that you're not actually very certain about what's going on here at all.
In general practice, we have to deal with a lot of uncertainty. We don't have all the tests and all the technology that hospital doctors do have. And so we're used to dealing with uncertainty, and we're used to not having that much at our disposal to make our decisions. So gut feeling for us is like our safety net. When we feel, I'm not really happy about this, then we may want to ask a second opinion, or we may want to schedule another appointment, or we may want to give the parents very detailed information on when to come back. That's how we want to deal with that uncertainty that is left at the end of the consultation.
Track 2.16. Tommy.
We got burgled once, and believe it or not, they got the burglars. My parents were having their kitchen renovated. The security wasn't very good, and the burglars got in really easily. They took all the usual stuff, the TV, jewellery, but I also had all my toys stolen. That's strange, but I did have an impressive collection of Transformer toys. I felt really upset. My world had come to an end. Now, the funny thing was, my toys were actually how they caught the thieves. One went to a football game and had his bag searched as part of security. The thief took the Transformer items to sell to a mate. Now, this particular security guard had a friend who was a policeman, and he'd told him about the strange theft of my toys, and he'd got in touch, and the thief got arrested as he was leaving that game. And the good thing was I got my toys back. I was happy on the day I got them back, but I lost interest in them almost immediately. I never played with them again.
Marissa.
My brother got himself locked in the garden shed at school and he couldn't get out. What happened was my brother didn't come home from school, so my mom and we started looking for him. And I was with my mother and she started getting more and more upset. And at first, I didn't completely understand what was going on, but I think I picked up on the general anxiety and that made me cry. So his disappearance got everyone looking for him in a small forest near our house, and people searched all night calling for him. I remember them shouting, "Charlie! Charlie!" It was terrible, and there was this desperate sound in their voice. I was so afraid. Anyway, the next day, the teacher arrives early at school and heard my brother crying in the shed. No one knows how it happened. Maybe the door got locked from the outside. Anyway, the funny thing is he's always loved gardening. I'm surprised it didn't put him off.
Clara.
So it was my first day at nursery, and I was left by my mother. This was the first time I'd been without her. Mum told me the nursery teacher was really worried. She said she was used to tearful, upset children, but apparently I was like an ice statue. She didn't really know what to do with me. She had me sitting on my own, and I think I remember her saying something like, "I'll get you set up with some paper and crayons," but I just sat there looking at her. I'm sure I had some kind of blank look on my face. I guess it was a kind of a shock. Eventually, a little boy asked me to join in a game. I'm not sure why. I went with him, and that literally broke the ice. He got me to play when no one else could. Guess who that little boy was? It was my husband, Andrew. We ended up being best friends at nursery, and I actually didn't see him for 15 years. And then suddenly we bumped into each other after university, and the rest is history.
Track 2.20.
Marissa.
My brother got himself locked in the garden shed at school and he couldn't get out. What happened was my brother didn't come home from school, so my mom and we started looking for him. And I was with my mother and she started getting more and more upset. And at first, I didn't completely understand what was going on, but I think I picked up on the general anxiety and that made me cry. So his disappearance got everyone looking for him in a small forest near our house, and people searched all night calling for him. I remember them shouting, "Charlie! Charlie!" It was terrible, and there was this desperate sound in their voice. I was so afraid. Anyway, the next day, the teacher arrives early at school and heard my brother crying in the shed. No one knows how it happened. Maybe the door got locked from the outside. Anyway, the funny thing is he's always loved gardening. I'm surprised it didn't put him off.
Charlie.
So, my sister Marissa always tells this story of me getting myself locked in a garden shed. That's just not true. I wasn't locked in. I was in there with my science teacher, Mrs. James. She was showing me how to grow things from seeds. We were transferring seedlings from large containers to individual ones. We were just so concentrated on the job, we forgot about the time. Marissa has a strange idea everyone searched through the night for me and Mrs. James found me in the morning. That's just not true. I think my mom was just slightly concerned I wasn't home from school. My mom came with Marissa to school late in the afternoon and found me and Mrs. James at work. Mrs. James was a bit embarrassed. Mom was pleased I'd, taken an interest. Marissa was right about one thing, though. Thanks to Mrs. James, I've always loved gardening.
Track 2.23. Part 1.
So, Oscar, before you go, can we have a quick word about your interview with Max Redwood?
Well, grand, yes.
How do you think it went?
Well, if you don't mind me saying so, it was like trying to get blood out of a stone.
Right.
Yeah, he wasn't an easy guy to talk to.
Tell me about it. If you ask me, maybe he should stick to writing.
I see where you're coming from, but guys, I think we're forgetting something here.
What's that?
We're the professionals.
Okay, but I thought I was being professional.
It's our job to get the best from our interviewees.
Are you saying it was my fault?
Look, don't take this personally, Oscar. I'm trying to be constructive.
Really?
I think a good interviewer can get blood out of a stone.
Okay.
I think we all need to learn from this.
I do take your point, but I'm not sure there's anything more I could have done.
I beg to differ. I agree Redwood wasn't particularly forthcoming, but my feeling is that there's always a way.
No offense intended, Oscar, but I couldn't understand why you were asking about a sequel.
Well, he will be writing another book, surely.
Well, anyway, Max clearly was a very hard nut to crack.
With all due respect, Sarah, I don't think you're in a position to tell us what does and doesn't make a good interviewer. We need to bear in mind that we're trying to run a business here. It's about getting results. We could lose a lot of listeners with an interview like that.
Okay, point taken.
Let's pick this up again tomorrow.
Track 2.27. Part 2.
Phew, that was hard going.
What, Nadia? Yeah, she can be quite tough, can't she?
You're telling me. It's the first time I've heard her criticise Oscar, though.
Probably because of his interview with Max Redwood.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Speaking of which...
Such a shame. I've read his book and it's fascinating. He must have loads to say about it.
Yeah. Speaking of which, you'll never guess what I found out recently. Max Redwood is my girlfriend's brother.
You're kidding. Emma's brother?
Yep.
No way. Have you met him?
Sort of. But he is staying with Emma at the moment.
Hey, I wonder if...
Yeah?
Well, could you maybe,
Well, get his number for you.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Sure, I'll call Emma.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alex.
I wouldn't mention that you're a journalist to start with, though.
Yeah, you're right. I'll say I'm a fan.
Well, you are a fan, aren't you?
Well, yeah, I suppose I am.
Hi, Emma. Yeah, listen, I've got a favour to ask about your brother.
Track 2.29.
So, you've obviously got a talent for music. Where do you think that comes from? Is your family musical?
Yes and no. My parents played a lot of music, but I wouldn't say they were really musical. They listened to music all the time.
And so you did too?
As a child, yes. We had it played to us all the time, whether we wanted it or not. My parents grew up in the 60s. They had a huge record collection, mostly rock music. So you could say I grew up with music in that way.
But they didn't actually play a musical instrument?
No, none of them played anything. But my grandfather, he was very musical.
Oh, yes?
Oh, yes. He had an incredible musical ear. He was a violinist. He played the violin in an orchestra, and he also travelled all over the world. So I think I'm similar to him in many ways, like a professional in an orchestra. They did international tours and everything like that, so I think I'd probably take after him.
Did you hear him play?
Yes, when I was a kid. About 5, I think. There was this day when I was at his place with my parents, and he was rehearsing something in another room. And I remember being intrigued with this sound. I don't know, it was almost an emotional experience. I was very drawn to it. I think that's when I became aware of music and wanted to play. And it just dawned on me, I wanted to play like that. It was that feeling that got me interested in playing. It was a really formative experience.
But you didn't start playing the violin?
No, I started playing my brother's guitar, actually. My older brother. He had a guitar, but he couldn't really play it. So I picked it up one day, and I started playing around on it. And the moment I started playing, I knew it was the right instrument for me. It was really weird, actually. It just felt right.
You've been very successful in a short space of time. Are you surprised by that?
Well, I never set out to become famous or make money. Music was always something I just did for fun. It was only when someone asked me to play on the local radio station that I thought maybe I could make a living from it. That was about a year ago.
And now you've released an album. It's called Memory.
Yes.
Is that about your grandfather? Those memories of him playing the violin? I see you've had an elderly man put on the cover.
No, it's not really. Well, maybe partly. But it's really more to do with travelling.
Travelling?
Yes. It started in my teens. I've always travelled a lot.
Like your grandfather?
Yeah, that's right.
So where did you travel?
Oh, lots of places. All over Eastern Europe, Turkey, Morocco. I went for countries that had good music. And I always tried to listen to the local music, and I recorded it. It's like most people take photos. Well, I do too. But I also recorded sounds I heard, music especially. I always come back from travelling with my head full of music, and gradually that works its way into my songs. So you could say they're my memories, I suppose.
Musical ones?
That's right, yeah. These are my musical memories.
Track 2.39. 1.
When it comes to football, I'm extremely patriotic. Who isn't? If I go to see England play anywhere in the world, there's only one football shirt you'll catch me wearing. I wouldn't be seen dead in anything else, particularly a French one. Same goes for any fan. Only trouble is, the shirt can get you into trouble. So here's the thing. Man goes to Cyprus, turns up to customs and hands over his French passport. The immigration officer looks at the passport and looks at the man. What's he wearing? An English football shirt. Just doesn't match, does it? A Frenchman wearing an English football shirt? Come on. Turns out this guy, this not-so-clever guy, well, he forged the passport. It was a fake. And by all accounts, he missed the game. The Cypriot police have locked him up.
2.
Stealing things. It sure makes you hungry. Here's a story of a young man who brings new meaning to the term serial offender. This 16-year-old was skipping class at high school and paying regular visits to a family home. Not his family. The homeowner says he doesn't have a key to his own house, so leaves it unlocked every day. So our 16-year-old truant gets into the habit of dropping in for some breakfast cereal and milk. Not just once, but on a number of occasions. And it was all going well until he logged himself onto Facebook with the family's iPad and forgot to log himself out. So, our young serial offender got caught and has been detained in a local facility for young criminals.
3.
Ever done the pocket dial thing? It can be a bit embarrassing. It can also get you arrested. See, this couple thought they were being very smart. They allegedly went to a supermarket and stole a whole heap of video games and DVDs. They had this great plan to pawn them for cash at the local pawn shop. Trouble is, when they were making their getaway, they pocket-dialed emergency services. I mean, they thought they were pretty smart, boasting about how the operation had gone so smoothly and how much cleverer they were compared to other thieves. They also talked about where they were going to sell their ill-gotten gains. Of course, what they didn't realise was that an emergency services operator could overhear the whole thing and noted down all the details. So, when they got to the pawn shop, guess who was waiting? The police, of course, with the handcuffs ready.
4.
Let me tell you about John Parsons, that very rare thing, an honest fraudster. And I have to say, Mr. Parsons is extremely creative, ingenious, you could say. He was stuck in a high-security facility, all nice and safe. Someone manages to smuggle in a mobile phone for him. Now, Mr. Parsons gets busy and creates a fake web domain. And from this domain, he emails a release form to officials for his very own release. So out of jail he walks, a free man. And the officials don't discover his clever little scheme for another 3 days. But this is where the fraudster turns into an honest man. He hands himself in. Or maybe life was boring on the outside. Anyway, he's back inside serving his 15 years for numerous counts of fraud. But even lawyers and judges agree John Parsons is nobody's fool.
5.
Now, here's a good story. You could say that it's unbelievable. Police are on the hunt for I guess you could call him a would-be burglar. Last Thursday night, he was having a go at stealing some bits and pieces from a shed in the Jesmond Dean area. So he was busy opening all these boxes, looking for some interesting items to steal, and one of the boxes contained something with a very interesting buzz. Inside was a hive of bees. Police are pretty sure our burglar won't have got away without a whole host of bee stings. So police want to know if there are any medical professionals or chemists out there who've treated someone with bee stings. Not very common in these winter months.
What you might call a bumbling crook.
Oh, yeah.
Track 2.40. Mike.
Well, I actually studied biology at university, and I've always wanted to get into conservation work, and I've been trying to get work on nature reserves in order to gain practical experience. And the trouble is I can't find a job with a paid salary. There's too many people these days who are willing to work on a voluntary basis. So at the moment what's happening is I'm volunteering at weekends and I'm working in a cafe during the week in order to make ends meet and pay the bills.
Olivia.
I left college in June and have a degree in tourism. Since then, I've been applying for many jobs in sustainable tourism, for example, ecotourism. That's what really interests me and I'm very passionate about. But unfortunately, in this current climate, it's very difficult to get a job. Unfortunately, the last job I applied for had 200 applicants, and I got on a short list of 10, but in the end, I didn't get it. The only way to gain experience nowadays seems to be to do an internship, but instead of them paying us, we have to end up paying them for this privilege.
Andrew.
I applied for a job in investment banking straight after I left university. My background is economics and business. I was lucky because I was immediately offered jobs by 3 different companies, and I decided that I would go for the job that I deemed to be most interesting. I managed to negotiate a higher salary than they were offering, and since then I've been working very hard indeed in order to prove myself, as there have been a lot of redundancies in the financial sector recently, and I certainly want to make as much money as possible while I can.
Karen.
I left school at 16 and I went straight to do an apprenticeship in retail. Unfortunately, by the time I finished my apprenticeship, a lot of people were made redundant and they couldn't keep me on. So I was unemployed for probably about 2 years. But eventually I found a job in this large store selling sports equipment, which I'm still there. I'm working shifts. I work morning shifts, afternoon and evening shifts. I get paid by the hours, so I try to get as many shifts as possible. So if I'm lucky, I can get a double shift and work around 40 hours a week, maybe. But more often, it's only around 10 to 15 hours a week. And that's hardly enough to live on.
Track 2.45. Part 1.
Hi, Mr. Edward. I'm Sarah Neroni.
Hello. Just call me Max. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Coffee?
Oh, yes, please.
2 coffees.
Thanks.
I am such a fan of your work. Thank you for agreeing to meet me like this.
Well, I tried to find time for my fans. I'm just sorry we couldn't meet up sooner.
That's fine. I know how busy you must be.
Yeah. So, you work with my sister's boyfriend, Alex?
Yes, that's right. You're staying with Emma at the moment, if my memory serves me correctly.
Just on a temporary basis, till I get my own place.
It must be a bit hard to write, stuck in her flat.
Well, I'm not actually doing any writing at the moment.
No?
No. To be honest, I think I've got writer's block. But hopefully I'll snap out of it soon enough.
Oh no. That must be tough.
Well, we'll have our ups and downs, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose.
Track 2.47. Part 2.
It must be really difficult writing science fiction.
I suppose so. I reckon I should have been a crime writer.
Yeah?
When your detective solves the murder, you just invent another murder, and then away you go.
I never thought of it like that.
Not so easy with science fiction. I think I've said everything I wanted to say in my first book.
Oh? I was under the impression that you were writing another book.
No? No doubt you heard that from that guy from the radio interview.
Oscar.
Yeah, him. What stands out in my mind most is that interview was a total disaster. I'd hazard a guess that he hadn't even read my book, hadn't even opened my book. Otherwise he wouldn't have asked about a sequel.
Track 2.50. Part 3.
Still, enough about me. What about you? Presumably you're a technician, like Emma's boyfriend, right?
Well, I'm not, actually.
Oh. I think I remember Emma saying that her boyfriend's a technician at City FM.
Yes, he is, but I'm a journalist myself. Sorry.
Oh. I see. Emma didn't mention that. I thought you were just a fan. I didn't know you were a journalist.
Suppose you'd known. Would you still have agreed to meet with me?
Well, not after that interview with Oscar what's-his-name.
So I suppose another interview would be out of the question?
Time to go.
I'm sorry. It's just that I'm a really big fan and I really need this break. I just didn't know how else to... Look, I've read your book and I absolutely love it. And I get that there simply can't be a sequel. After all, time does stand still at the end, doesn't it?
Right. Look, I might consider doing another interview.
You would?
But I need to have a think about it. let's meet up again soon to talk some more.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. When are you free?
Track 2.53. Mario.
I saw this really interesting job ad online, working in marketing for an IT company. It's a bit like my current job, but there were opportunities in the new job for more travel, and I thought, why not give it a go and apply? I sent in my CV and got offered an interview immediately. I thought, great. So I had this interview with an HR person. To start off with, it went really well. She told me she was impressed by my CV, and I could feel that I was giving her the answers she wanted to hear. You just get a sense of whether a job interview is going well or not. Then, after about half an hour, this HR woman said, "Oh, and of course we'll need logins for all the social media you use." And I replied, "Oh, you mean the professional one?" And this kind of suspicious look crept across her face, and she said, "No, I mean all social media." I was truly shocked. I was completely lost for words. For a minute, I just sat there and didn't say anything. Eventually, she asked, "Is there a problem?" At which point I said that I didn't really think it was appropriate for a company to access private social media. Then there was this stony look in her eyes, and she said, "All staff are required to provide access to the social media they use." I'm afraid I couldn't help myself, and I said that I felt they were overstepping a boundary by asking me for this, and that there were really privacy concerns. But she didn't back down. She said that the company expects access to social media, particularly of marketing staff. She said that it's essential that we project a positive image at all times, both in person and online. Well, I don't want my private life to be controlled in this way. And besides, I've heard of people getting sacked for making inappropriate comments about work. But of course, it's always the company that decides what's inappropriate or not. So, in the end, I politely told this woman that I wouldn't feel comfortable working for her company and quickly left. I mean, I know everyone's life is more out there and online these days, but demanding to see my social media is just a bit too big brotherish for my liking.
Layla.
I read this article the other day about people being surprised or shocked because prospective employers expect access to applicants' social media. I was a bit surprised by this article myself. Surprised because I thought, what do people expect in this day and age? We live so much of our lives online and it's such a public thing, so I don't really see a problem with employers having a look at my social media postings. In fact, this happened to me a couple of months ago. I applied for a job as an account manager at an advertising agency. During the first interview, the guy, who's now my boss, asked if he could friend me, and I agreed immediately. In fact, we sorted this out during the interview. This meant he could read through all my personal information and postings. He called a couple of days later to say I'd got the job. And do you know what swung it in my favor? He really liked my way of presenting myself online, and he was impressed by the sports training and charity work that I do in my free time. He also thought my pet cockatoo was very cool. So really, why wouldn't you want to give a prospective employer this kind of access? I really think it's advisable to do so. Of course, if you've posted material that puts you in a bad light, then I can see why you wouldn't. But in that case, the real issue is the way you use social media. I think that people tend to forget that just about anything you post online can be accessed in one way or another. So if you don't want people to read it, then don't post it. Social media are so much a part of my life, and I feel completely relaxed about sharing information. I do think carefully about the way I present myself, but no more carefully than I would if I walked into a room full of people I don't know. It's the same thing. What's the difference?
Track 3.4. So, Monica, I understand you're an amateur photographer.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I'm definitely amateur, but I'm not a photographer yet. Perhaps in the future?
But you've been studying photography.
Yes, that's correct. I've been doing this course about photography, and it's for complete beginners.
Why did you decide to do the course?
I think I could blame my husband for it. because he got me this fantastic DSLR camera, and it is quite a complicated object, really. If you don't know how to use it, it can be really complicated to take some photos. So I was wondering what I could do to improve and to know how to use it. And I started with those kind of tutorials on YouTube that you can watch, but it wasn't good enough because they were using quite a lot of jargon, and I wasn't really sure what they were referring to. So I decided to do a course to learn a little bit more about it so that I can use the tutorials in my own time.
Have they taught you anything useful?
The tutorials, not really, but then when I went to the course and I started my course, I've been doing this course now for a few weeks, and I'm learning all the time something new, so it's really, really good.
So do you feel more confident with your camera now?
A little bit. It depends on the types of photo that I want to take. Let's say that it's more kind of documentary type photos, then I would still use my auto mode, but I would still be quite perhaps I would be thinking more about the frame and the composition of the photo, because these are the things that I would normally learn during the course. So our tutor would be giving us some specific tasks on, for example, composition or panning effects or different techniques. And so after that, I would go outside the classroom. I would go and, for example, take some photos and focus on either one technique and then practice it, or I would just take as many shots as I can, because sometimes it's improvisation is also very good.
Have you discovered any bad habits since you started your course?
I think I was taking too many photos, and potentially I was taking photos of everything, and I wasn't really following any rules. But now I know that I have to be more careful with my settings of the camera and what exactly I want to take a photo of. So when I'm taking my photos now, I'm more cautious and kind of careful how I do it and what I really want to take photos of.
What's your favourite photograph that you've taken?
I think I've got two pictures that are my favorite pictures. The first one is, it's a static photo of a building. So when I was doing my course, there was this project. We were meant to take photos of an object, of a static object. So I chose this building that is meant to be demolished. Actually, it is being demolished now. So every single day you could kind of take a different photo of a different part of the building. So one day I was standing there and I was really lucky because they were actually taking a part of the window down and there was this massive hole in the building. So I was able to take a few interesting photos of the whole process, as well as the just the hole in the building. But there was this chair just in front of the hole, and it made the whole picture quite realistic, like there was still life in it, but actually the building is being demolished. So that's one of my favorites. And then the second one was a completely different project when I was trying to take photos of moving objects. And my subject was a 3-year-old girl, and she was playing in a garden, and she had this yoga mat that her mum was using, and she was just rolling into this yoga mat. And luckily for me, I was able to take a few interesting photos of her playing in the garden.
Track 3.10.
I could see her defeat and helplessness. The attendant seemed unaware, as if his perception had grown a reptilian covering. What did she care for the campaign for the preservation and welfare of copperheads and rattlers and common grass snakes? What did she care about someday walking through the woods or the desert and deciding between killing a snake or setting it free, as if there would be time to decide when her journey to and from school in Philadelphia held enough danger to occupy her? In 2 years or so, she'd retire and be in that apartment by herself with no doorman, and everyone knew what happened then, and how she'd be afraid to answer the door and to walk after dark and carry her pocketbook in the street. There was enough to think about without learning to handle and love the snakes, harmless and otherwise, by having them draped around her neck for everyone, including the children, most of all the children, to witness the outbreak of her fear.
See? Miss Aitchison's touching the snake. She's not afraid of it at all. As everyone watched, she touched the snake. Her fingers recoiled. She touched it again. See? She's not afraid. Miss Aitchison can stand there with a beautiful snake around her neck and touch it and stroke it and not be afraid. The faces of the children were full of admiration for the teacher's bravery, and yet there was a cruelly persistent tension. They were waiting. We have to learn to love snakes, the attendant said. Would someone like to come out and stroke Teacher Snake? Silence. One shamefaced boy came forward. He stood petrified in front of the teacher. Touch it, the attendant urged. It's a friendly snake. Teacher's wearing it around her neck and she's not afraid. The boy darted his hand forward, rested it lightly on the snake, and immediately withdrew his hand. Then he ran back to his seat. The children shrieked with glee. He's afraid, someone said. He's afraid of the snake. The attendant soothed. We have to get used to them, you know. Grown-ups are not afraid of them, but we can understand that when you're small, you might be afraid, and that's why we want you to learn to love them. Isn't that right, Miss Aitchison? Isn't that right? Now, who else is going to be brave enough to touch Teacher Snake? 2 girls came out. They stood hand in hand, side by side, and stared at the snake, and then at Miss Aitchison. I wondered when the torture would end. The 2 little girls did not touch the snake, but they smiled at it and spoke to it, and Miss Aitchison smiled and whispered how brave they were. Just a minute, the attendant said. There's really no need to be brave. It's not a question of bravery. The snake is harmless, absolutely harmless. Where's the bravery when the snake is harmless? Suddenly, the snake moved round to face Miss Aitchison and thrust its flat head towards her cheek. She gave a scream, flung up her hands and tore the snake from her throat and threw it on the floor, and rushing across the room, she collapsed into a small canvas chair beside the bear cabinet and started to cry. I didn't feel I should watch any longer. Some of the children began to laugh, some to cry. The attendant picked up the snake and nursed it. Miss Aitchison, recovering, sat helplessly exposed by the small piece of useless torture. It was not her fault that she was city-bred, her eyes tried to tell us. She looked at the children, trying in some way to force their admiration and respect. They were shut against her. She was evicted from them and from herself, and even from her own fear-infested tomorrow, because she could not promise to love and preserve what she feared. She had nowhere at that moment but the small canvas chair by the bear cabinet of the Natural Science Museum. I looked at my watch. If I hurried, I would catch the train from 30th Street. There would be no time to make the journey through the human heart. I hurried out of the museum. It was freezing cold. The icebreakers would be at work on the Delaware and the Susquehanna. The mist would have risen by the time I arrived home. Yes, I would just catch the train from 30th Street. The journey through the human heart would have to wait until some other time.
Track 3.11. Part 1.
Nadia?
Yes?
I've got some great news. I met up with Max Redwood the other day, and he says he's going to consider doing another interview with us.
What?
Max Redwood. He says he'll think about doing another interview with us.
Oh, I don't know about that, Sarah. You know, after last time.
I know, but he's really hot stuff at the moment.
That's true. But would he actually have something to say?
Well, if I do the proper preparation.
To be honest, it won't even be my decision, Sarah. I'd need to get Paul to sign off on this.
Paul?
It would need someone more senior than me to give the go-ahead for this. There's a lot of risk involved. It was a disaster last time. We need some really compelling reasons to go down this route again.
I see. Well, I could come up with those. Look, I really think this is worth a shot.
Well, look, why don't I invite Paul to our next team meeting and we can raise it then?
Okay, great.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the author interview series. And as I mentioned earlier, I've invited Paul today to get his take on it. Okay, so over to you, Sarah.
Thank you.
That's not a picture of Max Redwood, is it?
Yes, that's right. An up-and-coming author, but not a forthcoming one, as poor Oscar discovered.
You can say that again.
Oscar?
And there were many questions left unanswered. Now, as luck would have it, I bumped into Max the other day and I've got him to consider doing another interview. My focus today is on this second interview. Let me talk you through why our listeners want to hear more from Max Redwood. Well, first and foremost, he wrote his book from a bench on the Palace Pier right here in Brighton. However, he's not just a local celebrity. He's becoming famous on a national level. Let me take you through some facts and figures.
This is a bit over the top, is it not, Sarah?
I think these facts speak for themselves. Sales of nearly 500,000, rumours of a huge advance offered for a second novel, translations into 8 languages, 300,000 Twitter followers. I don't want to labour the point, but one thing is clear. Max Redwood is on the road to becoming an international best-selling author. Turning now to the focus of the interview itself, I've decided to talk about the creative process behind his work. More specifically, I propose to find out how science fiction writers like Redwood can imagine in such detail places and events that they can't possibly have experienced in real life. So to recap on what I've been saying, I'm proposing to re-interview Max Redwood due to his imminent stardom and focus on what inspired him to write Solar Wind. Now, if you'd like me to elaborate on anything I've just said, go right ahead.
What will you do if Max won't reveal any interesting information?
Well, I'll just have to cross that bridge when I come to it. But I'm planning to work quite closely with him in the run-up to the interview, so there shouldn't be any nasty surprises on the day.
That's absolutely the way to go. And you've clearly put a lot of effort into this, Sarah. Thank you. But I'm going to have to give it some thought.
Okay.
Nadia, can we touch base again on this later?
Sure, that's fine. Okay, moving on to the next item.
Track 3.14. Part 2.
Sorry.
Oh, you're back.
Yeah,
How are you feeling?
well, not 100% to be honest. But, you know.
Well, anyway, I've been dying to tell you about my meeting with Max the other day.
Of course, how was it?
Pretty good on the whole, but he thought I was a technician like you, and he was a bit angry when he found out I was a journalist.
Oh, sorry, I told you not to mention that you were a journalist.
Not to worry, he didn't seem to mind too much in the end.
Well, that's good.
Anyway, more to the point, he's agreed to think about doing another interview.
Great.
Yeah, I've just been presenting some ideas on it to the team.
Have you got any further with the famous sequel that Oscar was talking about?
Actually, no.
No?
No, there can't be a sequel because his first book was the end of the story.
Oh?
Because at the end, time stands still.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah, it's a bit of a sore point with him, actually.
So, he's reached the end of his story, but has he done the beginning?
What?
Well, if he can't do a sequel, he could do a prequel. You know, what happens before the events in Solar Wind.
I wonder. You might be onto something there, Alex.
Track 3.28. 1.
Politicians, media pundits, writers, and students get away with claims that are not based on fact. If I was ruler of the world for a day, I would install fact-checker apps into our smartphones, into our computers, so that when facts were broken, when people told lies or told mistruths, our phones went brrr, or the lines on our computer screen popped up in red. That way, we'd know what was fact and what was fiction. Of course, I wouldn't apply it to everyone. I wouldn't apply it to poets, to novelists, and others who specialise in imaginary ideas. My aim would be to ensure that we benefit from the age of the Internet of Things to have an Internet of facts and ideas. And through this, we would hopefully get away from the infuriating falsehoods that are being widely disseminated. Over time, good ideas would be spread far and wide, and bad ideas would be seen as a joke, rather than being the source of misinformation and perpetuating ignorance.
2.
The invention I would like to propose is a remote control that can modulate the amount of sensory information you get, the amount of sound or smell, visual information, etc. I came up with this idea because I cycle around London quite a lot, and every day I notice how much I am bombarded with the sounds of traffic and the smells of the city and visual advertising and media. I think this is something that in general people deal with in a number of different ways. Often it relies on putting more information or stimulus into your body, like wearing headphones or looking in your phone. A remote control would allow you to tone down what's there. I imagine it would work like a force field you can set at your ideal level, because everyone is different, and everyone has different ideal levels, and it just filters everything that comes in and out.
3.
Well, my idea for changing the world is quite simple, and it can be justified on the grounds of justice and fairness. It is simply that when someone is interviewed for a job, for example, that they should have to conceal their appearance. They would have to wear a mask. They would not be able to exploit their, let's say, personal or their social visual capital. They would have to be judged according to their merit. It would create a level playing field. It would ensure that the best person was recruited to a company, irrespective of whether that person was good-looking or ugly as conventionally determined. It would serve the interest both of fairness, in respect of that person's rights, and it would ensure a level playing field, therefore, for that reason. But it would also ensure the most meritocratic outcome. The best person would be chosen for the job.
Track 3.29. 1.
It's hard to argue with the idea that we want truth over falsehood. I think the trickiest part of this is actually knowing what the truth is and what facts are and aren't correct. And so, my biggest concern would be that the fact app might itself be full of falsehoods that we haven't found out yet or could be used to deceive us.
2.
I was intrigued, though, by the idea that you want to filter out these noises or smells or whatever it is when you're cycling. Isn't there a danger you could miss out something that's rather important for your safety? For example, you might just miss that taxi that was coming round the corner that you didn't know about. So turned down, you go straight into it. So I think you need a smart filter which would be able to recognise what was essential for you to see and hear. Red traffic lights, for example, and what could safely be filtered out, like advertisements or noise from building sites.
3.
It's a fascinating idea, and it's very close to home for me, because I've hired hundreds of people and done hundreds of job interviews, many of which have been over Skype or telephone. And I think I like the values and the spirit behind the suggestion. My hesitation about it is that, they say 80% of communication is nonverbal, and I think a lot comes across in expressions and bearing. Some of it is unfortunate and shouldn't influence your decision. Some of it is actually essential, I think, to assess someone's characteristics for a job. So I'm not sure what I think.
Track 3.31.
Welcome to From My Bookshelf, the weekly programme where guests talk about a book that they think everyone should read. This week's guest is media expert and commentator Zelda Freeman. Welcome, Zelda. Thank you very much for being here today. Tell us about your book.
The most intriguing book I've read in the past few years, Rewire by Ethan Zuckerman. He's an academic, and he thinks deeply about the role of media in our society.
Zuckerman, the main thing about his book, I hear, is that he's challenging the myth about the internet. Is that true?
Yes, the myth. And what's interesting is that we only think we're more connected, but the point he's making is that we're actually wrong. In some ways, the net manages to isolate us.
So we're all connected together, but we're isolating ourselves. That sounds like a contradiction. How's that possible?
Well, use myself as an example. I use the internet to find out news. I read a lot of newspapers online, but it's only British ones that I read. There's nothing stopping me from reading an English language newspaper in China. It's just a click away, but I don't. What Zuckerman is saying is that the internet is a very powerful tool, but very few of us exploit it to its full potential.
I have to ask, does it matter?
Well, yes. The reason why it matters is that we're living in an age of economic and physical connection. Our economies are connected. So if the share market in the US sneezes, then we all feel the effects. A dangerous virus breaks out somewhere in the world and it can travel around the globe very quickly. And more people are moving around. What we really need to understand is how other countries and cultures work. We're more linked into each other than we used to be, so we need to be a lot more cosmopolitan.
But in the 21st century, I'm sure a lot of people already know this. Does it actually matter if we don't do anything about it?
Well, good point. I mean, Zuckerman makes a very good point about that. We tend to think we know more than we actually do. It's a kind of false cosmopolitanism. And he uses this example because we know we could, in theory, read the Times of India online, but we almost begin to imagine that we actually do that, although in reality, we don't. It's the possibility of connection that means we begin to think of ourselves as being cosmopolitan.
So we begin to think that a possibility is a reality.
Exactly. I mean, that's fine for many things, but as far as the internet is concerned, I really think we need to think about it a bit more.
So why do you think that we don't connect more?
Well, Zuckerman suggests that our online behaviour is not that different from our offline behaviour. So, for example, we form social groups according to the people we meet as we grow up, and we get together with people with similar attitudes and interests.
So like we do in social media, we only friend people we want to actually be friends with.
Yes, that's right. What we don't do is explore much beyond that. But the thing is, we actually have the potential to do that.
So does Zuckerman himself, does he have any suggestions?
Well, he says that all we need to do is disconnect from our current way of thinking and rewire. We all have to learn to behave in a very different way.
How?
That's the problem. It's a challenge. You need to identify what he calls bridge figures. These are people who are able to translate ideas from one culture to another. They can explain it, give it context, and they help us to understand it.
So like in some kind of magazine or journal?
No, not really. He means being much freer than that. So, for instance, bloggers. These are people who have a passion for this kind of thing. Their information needs to be open and accessible, and therefore it's free for everyone.
Won't this just be more information online that people don't read?
So, as I mentioned before, business and politics are more and more connected. And business and political leaders need to be genuinely cosmopolitan in this day and age. So people who are bridge figures are likely to assume more and more important roles in business and also in politics. They've rewired already. So if we want to do well in the world, we need to rewire as well.
Track 3.37. Part 1.
Excuse me a moment. I'll have to take this. Hi, Wendy. Yes, I agree. We do need to talk this through. I'm with someone right now, though. Can I call you back? Yes? Okay. Speak later. Bye. Sorry about that.
No worries. Sometimes it can't be avoided.
It was my publisher asking about another book.
Oh. Well, most writers would be over the moon to get the opportunity to write a second novel.
Yeah. I'm not sure I could, even if I wanted to.
I'm sure that's not true, Max. I'm sure you'll come up with something soon. Hey, you know, Alex had a good idea yesterday for more to the Solar Wind story.
Alex?
Yeah. You know how we said a sequel is impossible? Well, he said you ought to write a prequel. You know, tell the story of what happens before Solar Wind.
So you've been talking this through with my sister's boyfriend?
Well, yes, I thought it might be a good idea.
I think it's a bit out of order.
Sorry?
First, you hide the fact that you're a journalist. Then, you go gossiping about me to the whole world. It's not on.
Well, I wouldn't say Alex is the whole world exactly.
To be perfectly honest, I'm not sure I can go through with another interview.
You're right. I was out of line.
People poking their noses in. I've had it up to here with it.
Max, please, it's not like that. I'm sorry it was inexcusable of me to pretend I was a fan, but I think you're overreacting here.
Oh, maybe so. But I think we had better call it a day. Please don't bother me again.
Track 3.41. Part 2.
Oh, hello, Max. Take a look at this house. Isn't it gorgeous?
Yeah, nice.
Look, it's dead cool. This website allows you to take a virtual tour around the house.
Right. But surely that price is way out of your league.
Yeah, but I thought for you.
Me? Why?
Well, you need somewhere to live.
Why don't you just come out with it? You're throwing me out.
No, of course not. Look, there's no need to get so worked up about it.
Why is everyone trying to organise my life for me today? First Sarah, now you.
Max.
Why doesn't everyone just get off my back?
Look, calm down, Max. I'm sorry. That wasn't very tactful of me, was it? But, you know, you do need a place of your own. We both do, to be honest.
You're right. As always.
Max.
I'm sorry I overreacted. I don't know what came over me. I've just been really stressed recently. But I had no right to take it out on you like that.
It's okay. We all lose it from time to time.
Me more than most.
What were you saying about Sarah?
Oh, apparently, she and Alex have been discussing my next book. Alex has got a brilliant idea, I'm told.
Oh, I see. And what's that?
Well, I should write a prequel.
Not a bad idea.
Do you honestly think that idea hasn't crossed my mind?
Oh, Max, don't get all angry again, please.
Well, for goodness sake. I'm fed up of being completely misunderstood all the time.
Well, if you've had that idea, why haven't you done anything about it?
Well, you wouldn't understand.
Try me. You know, this is just typical you. Constantly whining about how nobody understands you, but given half the chance, you can't be bothered to explain what's going on in that big head of yours.
Emma? All right, then. Fine. I'll tell you. I'm scared that I'll ruin Solar Wind by writing something rubbish that everyone hates.
Huh?
I'm scared, Em.
Do you remember that time you wrote that short story for the school newspaper?
Not really.
Oh, come on. You do so. What was it called?
Solar Breeze.
It wasn't, was it? Anyway, you write that story, the whole school loves it, Mum and Dad are beside themselves with pride, as are you, and Miss Hall suggests you entered the National Short Story Competition. Do you remember?
Yes.
And what a hoo-ha that was. You were entering the competition, you weren't entering the competition, you were, you weren't. Mum, Dad and I had to endure listening to at least 30 versions of it, sometimes even in the middle of the night. We all went without sleep for about 3 weeks.
Emma, look, I know where you're going with this, okay?
Good. And in the end, you won first prize. And I was so proud of you, Max.
You were?
Yeah. Because the thing about my big brother is he always pulls it off. Am I right or am I right?
You're right.
And tell me, how did you leave it with Sarah?
Sarah? I guess I overreacted there too, if I'm honest. Well, I had a bit of a go at her, actually. Stormed off. I know what you're thinking. Right again. I'd better ring and apologise.
Yeah, I think you better do that, Max.
Track 3.43. Claudio.
Deep down, Masha is a nice person. I mean, if we go and have a coffee together and just talk about everyday things, we get on just fine. But in meetings, she really winds me up. She's the most stubborn person I know. What annoys me is that once she gets hold of an idea, she won't let it go. She'll defend her idea and get quite aggressive about it. And sometimes she just won't stop talking, and I'm sitting in a meeting and inside myself I'm saying, "Stop talking now, please." Admittedly, she does have really good ideas sometimes. In fact, she's very creative. But she doesn't seem to understand that there can be other ways of looking at things. What she needs to do is lighten up, get a sense of humor. In this job, what you need more than anything else is the ability to laugh at yourself.
Masha.
There's something a bit old-fashioned about Sam that I find very sweet. It's the thing I like about him the most. He has lots of funny little habits, like every morning he has a coffee and a chocolate biscuit at exactly 9:45 a.m. It's always the same kind of biscuit and only ever one. The trouble is that this kind of precision affects the way he works. His attention to detail is incredible, but it's a bit of a handicap. What frustrates me is the way he absolutely refuses to start work on a project until he understands absolutely everything about it. And then, when a project is underway, if there is something that he thinks doesn't make sense, he'll call everything to a halt until he thinks it's sorted out. Sometimes it's just so unnecessary and it really slows things down. But sometimes the question he's asking is the right one to ask. And I have to admit, he's really good at predicting where problems might come up. But I just wish he was a bit more flexible.
Sam.
I sit next to Claudio in the office. The one thing I really appreciate about him is he's quiet. I don't like working next to someone who talks all the time. However, I know for a fact that when it looks like Claudio is really concentrating on something, he's reading a newspaper online. I can see his screen. I don't really think he should be doing that. And in team meetings, I find him a bit strange. What unsettles me is the fact he doesn't say a lot. He spends a lot of time sitting there looking bored or with a cynical smile on his face. I sometimes get the feeling that he's laughing at the rest of us. Still, when he does say something, it's usually worth listening to. Sometimes when I notice a problem in a project, it'll be Claudio who comes up with a solution. Vicky, our team leader, she likes that. I always get the feeling that Claudio's her pet. He is clever, but I think he's a bit lazy, and I'm not altogether sure he's sincere.
Vicky.
I'm really going to have to do something about the team I manage. We're supposed to be working on projects that improve business processes, but I feel like we spend more time managing each other than the project. We're not pulling together as a team. Team meetings have become really painful. There's no other word for it. The main reason why this is happening is that they just can't seem to communicate well with each other. Masha talks all the time and wants everything done her way. Sam interrupts and goes off on tangents, and Claudio just sits there looking as though everything were beneath him. I mean, they all have their strengths. Masha's a great ideas person, and Sam is brilliant at anticipating problems, and Claudio is the ultimate fixer, and he has a good sense of humour. But each individual is caught up in their own agenda. What we need to do is some kind of team building course or something.
Track 3.45.
We all sleep at night, but it's surprising how little most people know about sleep. We talked to sleep researcher Jonathan Wilson to find out what science has to tell us about sleep. Jonathan, first of all animals, including humans, need sleep, but why do we need it?
Well, that's a surprisingly difficult question to answer. The simple answer is we don't really know. But there are several theories about it. One is that it helps us to conserve our energy during the period when it's least useful to search for food. And another is that sleep provides a time when the body can repair and restore itself. And it seems this is especially important for the brain. One thing we know for sure is that we do need to sleep. Most people sleep for about 8 hours, which means we sleep for 1/3 of our lives. So on average, that's 25 years spent asleep. The other thing we know is you can't go for too long without sleep. It simply isn't possible. The longest recorded time that anyone has stayed awake continuously is 11 days.
So what's the ideal length of time to sleep? Is it 8 hours?
Not necessarily. Again, we don't know for sure, but research suggests that people who sleep 6.5 to 7.5 hours live the longest. So it seems the popular idea that we need 8 hours sleep isn't really true, and many people can easily get by on only 6 hours a night. Babies need most sleep, of course, about 16 to 20 hours a day for newborn babies, and that gradually decreases as they get older.
Track 3.48. Good afternoon. Well, some of you saw the article on our website last week. It explained how an 8-hour sleep may not be good for your health after all, and how people used to have what scientists call segmented sleep, which means they had 2 sleeps every night, not 1. Well, we've had lots of people calling in to tell us that they do, in fact, sleep in 2 separate chunks, and they've been filling us in on what they get up to at night. First of all, we've got Matt from Brighton on the line. Hi, Matt. So, tell us what you do at night.
Yeah, I usually go to sleep around 10 or 11. I naturally wake up at about 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning. I feel quite wide awake and restless. Then I get tired again at around 3 a.m. I drop off to sleep until about 7 o'clock or so. My friends have always made fun of my sleep patterns. My wife used to force me to get out of bed because I would lie there tossing and turning all night and I couldn't sleep a wink and it would disturb her.
Right, of course. So, what did you do about that?
Well, I actually decided to use the time creatively. Now I walk around Brighton taking pictures in the night. Some people might be a bit nervous walking around at 2 in the morning, but it is actually a really beautiful time to be out. You have the whole city to yourself, and it is really, really great for taking photos. There was a wild storm last night and a full moon, so I was itching to get out there with my camera.
Right, well, thanks, Matt. So, that's one idea if you're suffering from insomnia. Get out there and take some photos. Now, we have Saba on the line from Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Saba.
Yes, hi, how are you?
You also get up at night.
Yes, I've always been a light sleeper. I don't really sleep much. I wake up at about 4 a.m. every night to practice yoga. I love yoga. Most of the time I do it at home, but once a week I drive to this really great yoga studio in Amsterdam, and I practice there with about 20 other people, and we've all really become friends now.
So they all get up every night?
Yes, we all have the same pattern now. Sometimes I even get my husband to join us if he's having trouble sleeping, but most of the time he's fast asleep and doesn't even notice when I get up. He sleeps like a log.
OK, so you just slip away and go to your yoga class.
Well, I try to, yes, depending on how busy the day is.
And now we have Bernie from Manchester.
Hi.
Tell us about your sleep pattern.
Well, I'm an artist, or if that's not too bold a claim. I also work as an art teacher, and the way it works for me is most nights I tend to wake up in the middle of the night, feeling great, wide awake, full of beans, feeling very creative, and usually I have a very strong image in my head that I've usually got from a dream. And what I do is I get up, get my paints out, and I paint a picture.
A picture? From your dream?
Yes, that's right. Most of my work comes from dreams. Quite literally, I'm a surrealist, I suppose. Yeah, it helps me to deal with issues and work through things. I find the whole process of dreaming very therapeutic.
Interesting. And then you go to sleep again?
Yeah, I mean, what tends to happen is I go back to bed, and then I'll drift off to sleep for a couple of hours. But I'm always up at 7 o'clock. After all, I've got to teach at art college.
You never oversleep?
No, I'm always fine. Sometimes I will have a nap later in the day. I'm not as young as I was, after lunch.
Thank you, Bernie. So Bernie has 3 sleeps, 2 at night and 1 in the afternoon. I think I'll try that one myself. And lastly, we have Ian, who grew up in Indonesia.
Hi there, yes.
Ian, tell us about it.
Yes. Well, it's quite interesting. I grew up among the Yali people in Papua, which is part of Indonesia. My parents lived in a very remote area. My mom was a medical worker and Dad was an anthropologist, and we all lived in a remote village. I lived there until I was 16, and as a child I used to camp and go hunting with my friends in the Yali tribe. We would go to bed more or less after sunset, and we always woke up during the night.
The whole village?
Yes. We'd hear people talking, someone would start a fire. Sometimes we would eat sweet potato before going back to sleep until about 5:30 or 6. At home with my parents, I would get the regular 8-hour sleep, but with my friends, I slept like they did. It just seemed more natural.
OK, thanks, Ian. Very interesting. And now we're going to listen to the weather forecast. Track 3.55.
And are you that meticulous about what you eat?
I weigh and measure everything I eat and almost never eat out. I eat about maybe, instead of like 2 or 3 big meals for a day, I eat maybe 10 smaller meals. Kind of staves off hunger that way. This is what I actually usually eat first meal of the day. About 170 calories. So this first thing I'm going to do is this kale and shallot mixture. I kind of made myself. It's put in a food blender. And I weigh out 55 grams. That will be 30 calories.
And you do this every morning?
I do, right, first thing, and then every time I eat. Which sounds pretty onerous, but actually isn't so bad.
And you're getting, I assume, mostly carbohydrates from this?
I'm going to add olive oil here, so in fact it's going to be about 50% fats.
So what else do you have with this?
Okay, well, let me finish measuring out the kale here first. I have to measure it to the gram. There we have it. That's about 30 calories. And then I have sprouted oats, 16 grams. So that's about 70. Then this tomato paste here, 33 grams of that. And almost done then. There we go. And then finally, add some olive oil. It's 9.2. Now oils you have to measure to the 10th of a gram to be that accurate. And we're there.
Can I taste it?
If you like to, yes.
I have to say, it doesn't look hugely tasty to me or appetising.
I can understand it perfectly, yeah. So here's a spoon.
Here goes.
It's very colourful anyway.
It's actually not that bad.
No. The oil is, it's had the pepper in it, so it gives it more flavour, more of the flavour than you might think.
Not so sure about so much tomato in my breakfast like this.
Okay, that's one of my favourite things.
But really not as dreadful as I'd expected.
Oh, okay. Surprised you. I try and actually have a kind of window of eating from about 8 till 5 in the afternoon. So maybe like 8 or 9 hours, and then I don't eat outside of that.
Ever go to a restaurant for lunch?
Not very often, maybe a few times a year.
And how do you cope with that?
Like socially? Well, I either take some nuts, which I've weighed beforehand, maybe 200 calories of that, or I drink some water or tea around there. There's always some fluid there you can drink. So it's not as bad as it might sound.
As well as his extreme diet, Martin Knight lives a zen-like, stress-free existence in California. He practices yoga, goes jogging and lifts weights in his garden. And he says extending his life isn't his primary concern.
For me, it's more about quality of life, like here and now, the daily. I don't really think about the abstractions of living longer, though that might happen.
You're 49 now.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
I feel really good. I feel as good as I did 10, 20 years ago. I don't really feel any different.
Do you feel better in a sense since your diet has changed?
In some ways, actually, I do. I've a steadier energy level throughout the day, when before I maybe kind of dipped in the afternoon. It's more of a steadier level. And I think you more kind of have a higher alertness too. When you have a little bit of hunger in the background, then you're more aware, more alive.
Track 4.2. Part 1.
You're here late, Sarah.
Oh, hi, Nadia. Yeah, I've got a lot on.
How is the preparation coming along?
Good, yeah. I'm just so grateful for this opportunity.
Well, it could have gone either way with Paul, really. But he said he could see how much it meant to you and the work you had put into the presentation. He feels confident you can make the interview a success. We both do.
Oh, thanks, Nadia.
So what kind of stuff are you getting from Max?
There's a couple of interesting angles we could take in terms of revealing his inspirations.
Oh?
Yeah, I asked him how he got into science fiction, and he said he started getting ideas on life on other planets when he was a kid. He broke his leg, and to cheer him up, his dad bought him a telescope. He said he couldn't sleep at night, and he used to spend hours looking up at the night sky. So maybe we could explore the idea that insomnia breeds creativity.
Well, I'm not sure about the insomnia bit. It's a bit of a tenuous link. But overall, I think you've got some really good material here.
But you haven't heard the best bit yet.
What's that?
He has an idea for his next book, and he's giving us the title of it first.
Wow, what is it?
It's, wait for it, Gravity Zero.
Interesting. Are you okay there, Oscar? I didn't hear you come in.
Yeah, I'm fine. Just forgot my car keys. Again.
Anyway, Zara, I can't believe you've got us an exclusive on that. Well done. Good night, Oscar.
Night.
Track 4.3. Part 2.
Breaking news online, can I help you?
Hello, is that Miranda Hall?
Yes, speaking.
Oh, hello, this is Oscar Simmons. We met at a few press conferences. I don't know if you remember?
Oh, yes, Oscar Simmons from City FM. Yes, I remember.
Great. Well, I'm calling because I've been doing a little, what you might call freelance work. Anyway, I've got some information you may be interested in. Straight from the horse's mouth, I think it's fair to say.
What kind of information?
Exclusive information about our very own Max Redwood. You know, author of Sow the Wind.
Oh, right. The guy who famously wrote the whole book Staring Out to Sea from the End of the Palace Pier.
Exactly. I can give you an article about him, including a sneak preview of his next book.
I didn't know he was writing a second novel.
He is. And I'm offering you the chance to be the first to announce it, with the title.
The title? Well, yes, that would certainly be of interest. There's just the issue of how much you would like for it.
Well, how much would you be willing to pay?
Oh, I think we'd be prepared to offer, say, $250. Would that be a fair suggestion?
$250? Could you see a way to increasing that a little? I was kind of hoping for something more in the region of $500.
No, out of the question. What would you say to $350? In principle, of course. I'd need to see the article first.
$350. Is that your best offer?
Fair's fair. Remember, we haven't even seen what you're offering yet.
Okay, $350. We've got a deal.
And I need it by 1 o'clock? I want it on the website by today.
What? Today? How flexible can you be on that?
Well, if I don't get it by 2 and it's not the kind of thing I'm looking for, the deal's off.
Okay, fair enough. One last thing.
What's that?
Would you mind keeping my name off the article?
Freelance and anonymous, eh?
Yeah.
No problem.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Track 4.7.
Next on A Healthy Living, we talk to a chef whose style of cooking is based on ingredients our ancestors would have eaten in the Old Stone Age or the Paleolithic era, around, say, 100,000 years ago. Julia Dean is head chef at the newly opened restaurant Ancestors. Julia, 100,000 years, that's going back a very long way.
Yes, it is, and you can go back much further than that. The Paleolithic was a major period in our development as humans. It was the era where we truly became human. We started using tools, we learned to cook, and so on. It was also a period that lasted for a very long time, well over 1 million years, and that's very significant because it means that during this time, our bodies adapted to a certain lifestyle and to a certain diet. After that, we settled and planted crops and our diet changed, the so-called agricultural revolution. But that was only 10,000 years ago. It's not a very long time at all, relatively speaking.
OK, so your idea is that our bodies are still adapted to life in the Stone Age. We've changed, but our bodies haven't.
Yes, that's exactly right. We've got different technology, but we're the same people as we were then physically. So all the foods we ate then are what our bodies are accustomed to. They're what's good for us.
So you mean meat?
Yes, wild meat. Also fish, of course, and we dug up roots and found edible plants. So we ate fish and meat and lots of vegetables and seeds and nuts and also fruit, but of course only in season when we found it.
But no milk?
No, what we didn't eat was dairy products, and we didn't eat refined grains like wheat or rice. These came much later. And of course that explains why many people find these foods difficult to digest. And it's a diet that makes you gain weight and is essentially not very healthy, much less healthy than what was eaten earlier.
OK, I see why you chose the name Ancestors for your restaurant. So, if I go to your restaurant, I'll get the kind of food my ancestors ate in the Stone Age. It sounds a bit primitive.
Well, don't worry. We won't just give you hunks of meat and a few nuts. The idea of our cooking is to use these ingredients, but of course to create sophisticated, modern and very tasty dishes using them. So people come to our restaurant because they love the food, of course. But at the same time, they know they're eating healthily. They're eating what's good for them.
Well, put like that, it sounds very tempting. I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
That was Julia Dean explaining the Stone Age diet. And now...
Track 4.15.
Cities around the world are growing more crowded by the day. All us city dwellers experience the frustration of ever-increasing traffic on our roads and wear and tear on our amenities. Keeping transport moving and public amenities functional is an ongoing problem the folks who run our cities have to deal with. With an estimated 5 billion inhabitants of the world's cities by 2030, the challenge has never been greater. So, today, many major cities around the world are looking to mobile technology for their solutions. And there are a handful of products out there already that are aimed at helping to optimize the way we live in cities. One example is an app called Click and Fix. It's in use in a number of cities, and what it does is to let you communicate with your city maintenance services. People use their mobiles to let the city know where there's a problem. Something's broken or out of service, and then the idea is it'll get fixed straight away, or at least they get updated on what's being done about it. Michelle Thornton in Boston, USA, shows us how it works.
Well, look, I'm just going along the street, and if I see something that needs fixing, I can report it. It could be anything like a pothole or graffiti on a wall, or if something's been vandalized, or even a place where you're repeatedly having to risk your neck to get across the road. Anything like that. So right now, we're going past a park, and there's a railing that's been smashed in here. It's all bent. So I'll go on the app, and then I just take a snap of it. And I'll choose the most appropriate issue category. So I'll choose park issue. The app knows where I am, of course. And then just send it off. And you can see it comes up here. It's saying it's received. Then I can look it up later, and it will tell me if it's in process or hopefully fixed. I think it's a great idea. It means that I, as a citizen, can be more involved. So it's a kind of democracy in action, if you like. And it also saves the city money.
Track 4.16. Frank.
I've got an app here on my phone called Train Spotting. I use this all the time. In fact, I couldn't manage without it. I commute into town, and it actually shows me not just when the train's due, but exactly where it is. Which is great because sometimes the station announcements are basically all over the place. You can't really trust them. So, I can get the map here, blow it up a bit like that, and yeah, there's my train. It's just left the last station, and it's due in 2 minutes.
Rita.
Okay, this isn't an app, but it's an information screen. And they've got these screens all around the city. They're all over the place. And it can tell you whether your health is okay, which is really useful, especially for elderly people. So you press this panel here, and it reads your blood pressure and your body mass index, blood sugar level, pulse, all those things. And it also tells you how stressed you are. It reads the whole thing just from contact with your finger. It's a touch screen. It's amazing. So let's give it a whirl. I put my finger on it, press OK, print. OK, it's printing it out now. There we go. Let's see if I'm OK or whether I'm about to keel over. No, it says everything's normal. That's a relief. But stress level high, it says. Oh well, what can you do?
Nick.
Yes, well, this isn't an app, but it's a cool idea. It's called Strawberry Tree, and these are artificial trees, and they're dotted around the city. They're basically solar-powered phone charging points. They're shaped like trees, so they blend in. And the canopy consists of solar panels, which feed into batteries for charging your mobile or your laptop. It's all free, of course. So you can go to the park, sit and chat to people, or you could drink coffee, and they charge up your phone for you. It suits me because I've got mine like a sieve. I'm always going out without charging my phone, so it's a real lifesaver for me.
Track 4.27.
As Chinese tower blocks get higher and stranger, the debate is getting fiercer. The architects of this building in the city of Suzhou say it's a mix of Western form and Chinese subtlety. Local residents see it differently. We call it the giant pair of pants, this man says.
The giant pair of pants isn't the only iconic modern building to have come in for a barrage of barbed criticism from Chinese internet users complaining about what they see as increasingly outlandish foreign designs completely out of keeping with Chinese culture and architectural heritage.
The danger is for some cities, they don't have this need and they just construct so many high-rise buildings as a symbol. One city constructed a 300 high-rise building, another city would like to construct 400 meters and another 600 and so on. This competition is nonsense.
But the Chinese skyscraper is sprouting fast and might soon get even faster. This took little more than a week, and now the company behind it says it will build the world's tallest skyscraper in just 3 months. heritage is important, some experts say, but so too is solving the problem of China's overcrowded cities.
A city like Shanghai, 20 million people already, could easily go to 30 to 40 million people. And I would subscribe that spreading that out further and further away from a kind of central core is more detrimental, it's less sustainable than keeping things more dense and going vertical.
But with more than 300 skyscrapers currently under construction in China, the debate is only going to intensify. Is the country laying the foundations for a well-planned urban future, or flying by the seat of its architectural pants?
Track 4.28. Part 1.
You're cheerful today.
Yeah, well, I am. It seems like everything's falling into place, at last.
Oh?
Yeah. My new book's coming together well, and I really think it's going to work. And, guess what? I think I found a place to live.
Wow, that's brilliant.
Yeah, it's in a renovated warehouse down by the marina.
Sounds very avant-garde. Hey, Max, there's an article about you on Breaking News Online. Look.
But I've never even spoken to anyone at Breaking News Online. This is outrageous. Listen, night owl Max Redwood spent his childhood gazing up at the night skies. This is beyond belief.
But it's true. I remember when Dad gave you that telescope.
They've got no right to publish this. Where on earth did they get this from? Who wrote it?
There's no name.
I don't believe it. They've even got the title of my next book in here.
Let's see. Gravity Zero. So they do.
But I haven't told Sarah. It's disgraceful. How dare she?
Sarah? But she doesn't work for Breaking News.
No, but she's the only person I've told.
Let's not jump to conclusions. There's something fishy about this. Why would Sarah give the exclusive information that she needs for her big break to someone else?
I don't know. I'm lost for words.
I smell a rat.
What do you mean?
Someone else at City FM must have leaked the information.
Maybe. Anyway, whoever it was, they've got no right. I'm ringing them right now.
Hold your horses, Max. Think about what you want to say first.
Track 4.30. Part 2.
This is Max Redwood, and I'm calling to express my dissatisfaction. No. This is Max Redwood, and words cannot express my anger. Oh, for goodness sake. Hello? Is that the editor-in-chief at City FM?
Yes, speaking.
This is Max Redwood. I really feel you owe me an explanation for the article which appeared on Breaking News.
Yes, I've just seen that. I can assure you that we are just as upset as you are.
Really? Well, I spoke in confidence to Sarah Neroni. The next thing I know, I'm in an anonymous story online. And the title of my next book has been announced. It's totally unacceptable. Don't you think you should take full responsibility for this?
There's no need to raise your voice, Mr. Redwood. I do understand, and I have every intention of investigating the matter. Should I discover that any of the team have been involved, I can assure you, there will be consequences.
How would you feel about someone you trusted revealing your confidential information in the press? You failed to fulfill your responsibility to protect my privacy.
I really don't know what else I can say. Once I get the lie of the land, I'd like to invite you in, and we can discuss it face to face.
Absolutely not. And I'd appreciate it if you didn't try to contact me again. It's over. Finished. Finito. The end.
Track 4.33. Part 3.
Oscar,
You wanted to see me?
take a seat. Have you got something to tell me, Oscar?
No. Should I?
There's an article on Breaking News Online about Max Redwood.
Oh.
Yes. It gave me a strong sense of déjà vu, actually. It's full of Sarah's information, including the title of the book.
Really?
Yes.
So, are you thinking someone leaked it?
Yes, I am, Oscar. You were the only other person in the office last night. I know you overheard our conversation.
What are you saying?
What's more, I happened to find this business card on your desk. Miranda Hall, Editor-in-Chief, Breaking News Online. Had a little rendezvous with Miranda, have we?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oscar, by selling information to other organizations, you are in breach of your contract.
You can't sack me. I'll take you to court.
I'm not going to sack you. You're right. You're going to resign. If you take us to court, you'll lose, and you'll never work in journalism again. I'll expect your letter of resignation in the morning.
Track 4.36.
So, a flat white and a long black. That's $7.50.
Here you are.
But isn't it my turn?
Thanks.
The coffee's on me, Ron.
You sure, Lizzie?
Well, look on it as a kind of celebration.
Really?
Yeah.
Should we sit here?
Yep.
So, what's up?
What do you mean?
Well, you don't exactly look like you're jumping for joy. In fact, I'd say you almost look a bit miserable.
Thoughtful, not miserable.
Okay, but you still haven't told me. What are we celebrating?
It's Josh. He's won a scholarship. University of Auckland Academic Excellence.
Lizzie, that's great. Pass on my congratulations to him. Oh, that's wonderful. Proud mum, eh?
Yeah. Yeah, I do feel proud. He's studied hard and done really well.
So why the long face?
Well, it just hit me, this whole thing of Josh leaving home, off to the big smoke.
Yeah, no, it's hard when they leave the nest. When Jessica went off to uni last year, it took me a while to get used to her not being there.
Yeah, I remember.
It did mean I was able to reclaim the bathroom for myself.
A lot to be said for that.
But I still miss her.
Yeah, Josh is my first to go.
Well, they'll probably all go and live elsewhere in the long run, all our kids.
Yeah, they've got to really though, don't they?
Well, they can't stay in this town and hope to get a decent education.
Problem is, and this is what I've been thinking about, nor are they likely to return. I mean, even if Josh did want to come back and live here, there wouldn't be any jobs for someone with an engineering degree.
Yeah, Jessica reckons she wants to get into marketing or something like that. Don't see much chance of her coming back here to do that.
But that's the thing. See, everyone just goes off to Auckland or Wellington and they never come back. And then small towns like these, they just get smaller and smaller.
Yeah, but it's not just the kids going off to study, is it? What about when they shut down the timber mill? That meant a big exodus.
Yep, we've lost just over 1,000 people in the last 5 years. Makes me feel like packing up myself and moving on.
Yeah, I have to say, the thought has crossed my mind.
But imagine the price you get for your house here and then the price of houses in a place like Auckland. I just couldn't afford to do it.
Nah, we're better off sitting tight.
Yeah, nah, you're probably right.
And the truth is, I'm not unhappy. Life's a whole lot less stressful here.
That's certainly true.
And I've got some good friends, like yourself. We can keep each other sane.
Yeah, but this scholarship thing, it just made me think. Like, I could see we might end up being the last generation that lives in a town like this. I mean, will the population just keep getting smaller and smaller, and then what?
To the point that we don't exist anymore?
Yeah, something like that.
But hey, enough of these pessimistic thoughts. Let's just celebrate Josh doing well for himself.
Yeah, I must have done something right bringing him up.
Maybe. But any kid's only as smart as their mother. Or their father.
Absolutely.
Track 4.40. Rob.
I agreed to be best man at my friend Dan's wedding. I mean, I was really thrilled that I was asked. It was a great honour. I was fine with the whole thing, you know, organising the pre-wedding party, the ring, everything. I just threw myself into it. But the one task that really unnerved me was having to give a speech at the reception. I'm just hopeless at giving speeches. They make me feel right out of my depth. I should never have agreed to be best man, but, Dan's my best mate. Anyway, I decided to get organised and I planned the whole thing out. You know, I thought of some funny stories about Dan and all that sort of thing. And I worked out who I needed to acknowledge and say thanks and all that stuff. I put it all on little cards. So by the time the big day came around, I was feeling reasonably on top of things. Just before going to the church, I started feeling really jittery. And while I put all the cards in the pocket of my jacket, I forgot to check they were all there. I really regret not doing that. Anyway, we got to the reception and I somehow managed to get through the speech. Got a few laughs at my jokes. I thought I'd made a good job of it, but Dan was giving me these funny looks. The card I forgot was the one where I thanked the bride's parents and all that sort of thing. And the bride, Jessica, was not impressed. So now there's this strange tension between Dan and me, and Jessica is very cool with me. It's all a bit awkward. I mean, it was a genuine mistake. If only I'd checked those cards. And I have to say that part of me wishes that Dan hadn't asked me to be best man. Oh well, I guess they'll get over it. Eventually.
Chantal.
Ever since I started my present job, I've had this really strange relationship with this colleague of mine, Martin. Back then, we were both at the same level in the company, and it's like he somehow resented that. Like I should have started out on a lower level or something. Who knows? We had to do this joint presentation to managers on a project to upgrade the IT systems in the company. We worked out the content together. Well, actually, a lot of the ideas were my ideas. And then Martin agreed to make our PowerPoint slides look good. He's good at that kind of thing. So, anyway, everything was on a memory stick, and Martin said he'd take it home and work on it and make it look really professional. I really wish I'd copied the presentation onto my hard drive. You know the golden rule. Always make a copy, otherwise it's a recipe for disaster. So, the next day, we go upstairs to this meeting room to give our presentation. Martin plugs the memory stick into the laptop and it's just not there. He's incredibly apologetic and says he can't understand what went wrong and all that sort of thing, but I have my suspicions. For a minute, I was in a state of absolute panic, and then I thought, I can do this. So when all the managers came in, I just told them the truth. That we'd had a problem with IT, but that I would give the presentation anyway. You see, the one thing Martin didn't know about me is that I'm very good at improvising. And I just explained the whole project and it went like clockwork. The managers were all impressed and I really made my mark. In fact, I'm pretty sure my presentation led to my promotion and I became manager of the project we were presenting. If it was Martin who sabotaged the presentation, I've no doubt he now regrets deleting all that data. Not me. Had he been less underhand, I might not have the job I've got now.
Milos.
I'm a volunteer paramedic on an air ambulance service. It's very costly to run a service like this, so we need to do quite a bit of fundraising. One of the ways we can do this is by going around to different community groups and talking about our work. It's not something I'd say that I enjoy, but I can do it well enough. This friend of mine, Teresa, has given me a few tips. She told me to look at a point towards the back of the room and avoid looking at people's faces. It can put you off. Anyway, I was giving a speech to a parent-teacher association at the local primary school, and about halfway through, for some reason, I looked down at people in the front row, and there she was, Ivana, looking up and giving me a gorgeous big smile. Ivana was the most beautiful girl in our class at school. She wasn't my girlfriend, but I used to wish she were. So in the middle of the speech, my heart melted. I turned to jelly. I couldn't go on. I was completely lost for words. I just sort of stood there like an idiot and grinned back at her. I grinned and she grinned, and well, what a romantic fool. I was sort of saying to myself, come on, get a grip on yourself, but no way. You know, if I had listened to Teresa's advice, I might have been okay. In the end, I think I sort of apologized and told people to look at the website, and then I made a pretty quick exit. Needless to say, we didn't get many donations from the Parent-Teacher Association. If it wasn't for my stupidity, we could have raised more money that day. They haven't asked me to give any more speeches, a good thing. I'm just sticking to being a paramedic these days.
Track 4.48.
All these objects are lucky charms from different parts of the world. They're all supposed to bring luck or protect you in some way. This is a horseshoe, and these were traditionally nailed above doorways in Britain and also in the USA, and they bring good luck to the household. Because they're over the door, they stop bad luck entering the house, and they protect it against magic spells. Some people say it's important that the open side should be upwards, so the luck doesn't run out. In other words, the horseshoe collects the luck for you. Now, this one is a special kind of mirror, which are traditionally used in China, and they're an important part of feng shui. It's customary to hang them above the front door of a house, and they always face outwards so they can ward off evil and protect the house. The idea is that the mirror deflects any bad energy coming towards the house, so it's very important that you should hang them outside the house, not inside. And this figure of a cat is called maneki neko, which literally means beckoning cat. You may see these if you go to a Chinese or Japanese shop or a restaurant. They're often just by the door. They come from Japan originally, and they're supposed to bring good fortune to the owner. You see, the cat's paw is raised. Sometimes it's the left paw and sometimes it's the right paw. If it's the left paw, this attracts customers. And if the right paw is raised, it invites good fortune and brings wealth to the owner. So it's a good idea to have both kinds. And these are wish bracelets, which are worn as a good luck charm in Brazil. And they're also worn just as a fashion accessory because they look good. The idea of these is you tie the ribbon 3 times around your wrist and you make a wish with every knot you tie. If the ribbon wears out naturally and falls off your wrist, your wishes will come true. So it's really important not to cut the ribbon off.
Track 4.54.
Even if you don't go to the theatre or know much about Shakespeare, you've probably heard of Shakespeare's character, Macbeth, who murders the King of Scotland and then becomes king himself, only to be destroyed by his enemies and by his own guilt. What is not so well known is that Macbeth is also considered an unlucky play by actors. Actor Naomi Atkins is about to play the role of Lady Macbeth in a new production at the Cavendish Theatre. Naomi, tell us about the superstition. The play is supposed to be cursed, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. And especially it brings bad luck if you mention the play by name when you're in the theatre. So we always refer to it indirectly. We always call it the Scottish play or that play. Some actors even avoid quoting lines from it before a performance. As you know, the play opens with a scene with 3 witches cooking a magic potion, and people say it's especially unlucky to quote the witches' lines at the opening of the play.
And what happens if you say the word Macbeth? Are you cursed?
Yes, or the production is. Something's bound to go wrong, but there's a kind of penalty you can pay to make it all okay again. This actually happened to me. I said the name of the play by mistake during rehearsals.
What happened?
Well, to stop the curse, I had to leave the theatre building straight away. Then, when I was out in the street, I had to spin round 3 times, spit, curse, and then knock on the door to be allowed back in.
And that neutralised the curse?
That neutralised it, yes. We had a good laugh about it. It was a bit of a joke, but you'd be surprised how seriously some people take it.
Do we know where this comes from? Why is the play cursed?
Well, no one knows for certain, but as I said, the play does start off with a scene where witches are casting spells, and Shakespeare is believed to have got the words from real witches. And then the witches saw the play, and they put a curse on it because, of course, the play revealed their spells.
Another explanation I heard was there's a lot of sword fighting in the play, so people think there's more chance for someone to get injured, so it's unlucky in that way.
Yes, there are lots of different ideas. Another explanation is that the play was very popular, so it was often put on by theatres that were in debt as a way to increase their audience numbers. But then, of course, the theatres normally went bankrupt anyway, so they put the blame on the play, and they said it was cursed.
That's a nice idea.
Yes, I like that one. As I say, nobody really knows.
Track 4.55. Part 1.
I asked you not to contact me again, didn't I?
I know that, Mr. Redwood, but I just wanted to...
You've got a nerve.
Sorry, if I could just finish what I was saying, Max.
Oh, go on then.
I've managed to track down the source of the leaked story about you.
Don't tell me. Sarah was gossiping about me again.
Sorry to interrupt, but Sarah wasn't idly gossiping. She was updating me on her research and was overheard by another journalist who showed some very poor judgment. He's no longer a member of our team, I hasten to add.
I see.
I'd like you to at least consider coming in for your interview with Sarah tomorrow. I know how much she was looking forward to it, and I think it would be refreshing for all of us after our experiences with Oscar Simmons.
Track 4.56. Part 2.
Thanks for this, Max.
No worries.
Hello, my name is Sarah Neroni, and I'm going to be talking to Max Redwood, author of the best-selling science fiction novel Solar Wind, and who is in the process of writing his second novel, Gravity Zero. Good to see you, Max.
Thanks. And good to see you too, Sarah.
Now, as anybody who's read your first book will know, you are an incredibly imaginative, creative person, Max. But where do you get your inspiration from? Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Before we get started, can I just make a point about creativity? I just wanted to say that it doesn't come easily all the time. I was in a bad place up until recently. I thought all of my ideas had dried up. But my fans got me through that and encouraged me to keep at it.
Oh, really? I'm glad to hear that.
But anyway, to answer your question about inspiration, I think I first got interested in space travel when I was growing up.
Speaking of which, you grew up here in Brighton, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. It was really my dad who got me into space. I mean, first got me interested in space. He bought me this telescope, and we would look up at the stars at night together. I'd imagine all sorts of weird and wonderful worlds up there. And I never...
Did you say... Please, after you.
Yeah, as I was saying, I never forgot those worlds.
Now, if you don't mind me coming in here, you had trouble sleeping as a child, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. So I spent more time than most kids that age in my own little world.
Track 4.58. Part 3.
Thanks, Max. I think that went really well.
Yeah, seemed to go okay. I quite enjoyed it, actually.
Hats off to you both.
Well, credit where credit's due. Max made it so easy.
Well...
You were so different this time, weren't you? You know, from that interview with Oscar?
Well, that's because you're a better interviewer than Oscar.
That's right. You are.
And I'll tell you what, I overheard Nadia singing your praises this morning.
Really?
Gushing, she was. Thinks you're the best thing since sliced bread.
Do you think my job is safe then?
Definitely.
Listen, Sarah, Alex and Emma are coming over to my new place tonight. You'd be very welcome.
Thanks very much, Max. I'd love to.
Great.
I'll wait till you see the place, Sarah. It's a converted warehouse. It's massive, isn't it, Max?
I suppose so.
Oh, plenty of room for dancing then.
Well, it's not going to be that kind of thing, really.
No?
Well, I thought we could all sit down together and watch Moon Station X.
Oh. Great.
Track 4.62. Sasha.
I'm a review addict. I'd never dream of going to see a film without checking the reviews online first. I think it's worth seeing whether a film has good reviews or bad reviews. Even if someone has recommended it to me, I like to read the review first before I see it myself. And I find that online reviews are good because I get a very wide range of different opinions. I like this because it's more reliable than the newspaper reviews that are written by these so-called experts. You know, the online reviews are written by ordinary people like me. I also like reviews for accommodation and travel destinations, products, electronic equipment. It's one of the incredible things about the internet. Everything's been reviewed by someone somewhere in the world.
Marie.
I read a lot of film reviews, mainly in newspapers and magazines. I trust a professional opinion, and there are actually some reviewers that I can really rely on to recommend some good films. But I don't read the reviews to help me decide whether I should watch a film or not. I read it afterwards, so it doesn't spoil it. I think also it's interesting to compare the review with what I initially thought of the film, and it can usually help me understand the film better, especially if it's a more obscure or complex film. And also, reading the review can sometimes help me in case I missed something in the original film. I don't like the kind of internet amateur reviewers because, I mean, you don't even know who these people are, and they might not even have the same taste in cinema that I might have.
Kim.
I can never be bothered with reviews. I mean, I usually download films and watch them at home. I hardly ever go to the cinema anymore. I choose something that I like the look of. It doesn't have to be great. It's just a way for me to switch off completely after work and wind down, you know? It's just relaxation. I really don't understand why some people take films so seriously. I do look at reviews for some things. I mean, if I'm going to buy a laptop or a TV and I'm spending that much money on something, then yes, there's a difference between the products, but not for films.
Esser.
I avoid reading reviews of films or TV series, especially TV series, because I just don't trust them, because I think it's just one person's opinion, and I'd rather go and see a film with an open mind without any preconceived ideas about what it might be like. Reviews nearly always contain spoilers of some kind. They mention something about a character or something that is about to happen. I don't like that. I'd rather start watching a film without knowing anything about it. And sometimes, if I really like the film, I would like to go and read the review after I've seen it, but definitely not before.
If you like this video,
Please subscribe to create more content and keep on practicing your English. See you next